Hey, everybody, how's it going? It is Thursday, October 24th, and as we always do here on the program, sorry for the delay, by the way, but if you can hear us on the live stream chat, weigh in. Pat Rod, where are you at, buddy? Let's hear from you. And as we always do, well, I say always, we've been doing this for like 2 weeks now. Ben Joravsky, what is our song of the day?
Rainy days and Monday always get me down.
Oh, all right.
Hanging around. That's one of Brian's favorite songs.
Is
man.
it? Now, don't say who sings it. Live stream chat. Who sings that song? If you can hear us.
If you can decipher that song.
Say, hey, I hear you, or the artist of that song, and we will get today's show rolling.
Hanging around. Come on, Brian, sing the background. Hanging around.
Oh, okay. That was good.
I didn't know the man could sing.
That was awesome.
Yeah.
All right, let's see here. Live stream chat. Where are you at? Looking for you here. Somebody, weigh in. Somebody, say something before we get going here. That's what we do here. Shout out to our techie, Brian. He is awesome. Going through technical difficulties. Another day here in the Ben Joravsky Show. All right, waiting for someone to respond. Pat Rod, dude, come on. Where are you at, bro? All right, let's just go ahead and start anyway. What do you say, Ben?
Good idea.
All right. Your Ben Joravsky Show for Thursday, October 24th is just moments away. But before we get into that, we need to thank the following unions for sponsoring this program. First up, it's the International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers, Local 126 in District 8, the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local 9, the International Union of Operating Engineers, Local 150, and of course, today's show is brought to you by our good friends at the Chicago Federation of Labor. The Ben Joravsky Show starts now. It is Thursday, October 24th, and live from the Chicago Sun-Times Chicago Reader Studio on Racine Avenue, this is the Ben Joravsky Show. Today on the program, in these times, writer Miles Kampf-Lassin returns, and it's the long-awaited return of former host of Chicago Newsroom, or what Ben calls the Kenny D Show, our good friend, Kenny Davis. And now your host, Chicago Reader columnist, Benny J. Ben Joravsky.
Hello, everybody. Ben Joravsky here. We're calling this the greatest idea ever Thursday. Whoa. And here's why. So, folks, as we enter day 6, or is it day 8? I'm losing track, D, of the teacher strike.
6.
Oh, it's 6. Great. Very good. Well, the Tribune says 8, but we'll go in with 6, all right? Because Tribune counts weekdays, weekends, where kids don't go to school anyway. Well, we're counting them anyway. All right. As we enter day 6 of the teacher strike, I've discovered the greatest solution ever to our problems. It came to me in a moment of inspiration, folks, as I was running to catch the train today. Running up the street to catch that train.
That's how that sounds, listeners, him catching the train.
And here's my idea. Let's call off school for the rest of the year. All right?
Oh, okay.
Now, I know what you're thinking. All right? You're thinking, but it sounds so radical. Bear with me, folks. Makes lots of sense. For one thing, it dovetails perfectly with Mayor Lori Lightfoot's budget call for shared sacrifices and prudence in spending. Think of all the money we will save. It's got to be hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars in salaries if we just call off the school year. We could send that money back to the taxpayers. Well, of course, after the bankers get their cut for interest payments on the money they've lent us to pay our obligations, hey, got to take care of the bankers. And after the developers get their cut to develop all those neighborhoods that would have developed anyway, come on, people. Got to worry about the developers. They got kids, too. And their kids have private school tuitions to pay. So after the bankers and the developers get their money back, we should have at least $1 million or so in a refund for the regular taxpayers. Now I know the lights just went off. Hey, Brian, you got to pay that light bill every now and then, all right, dude? Just the lights went off. Just such a radical idea. Brian, turn off the lights. Hey, you want to save money? All right, we'll start with electricity. Trying to read my script here, young man. Anyway, where was I? Before the lights went off. Oh, yes, I know what you're thinking. I know what you're thinking, Ben. If there's no school, what are we going to do with the kids? Now, come on, people. If there's one thing we've learned from our Chicago Tribune, from their editorials and their columns, if there's one thing we've learned is that school is overrated. We've discussed this. This is what the Tribune's been telling us ever since the strike began. The teachers want more nurses. They want more librarians. They want more social workers and counselors. What has the Tribune told us? They've told us nurses? Overrated. Just have parents pick up the kids when they're sick. Librarians, way overrated. You want to learn how to do research? Just look it up on Google, okay? Who needs teachers? Just get spell check. There goes spelling bees right out the window. School is overrated. Personnel's overrated. Lower class size doesn't matter. There was a study somewhere that someone did. Who knows if it's credible. Says you can stuff as many kids in a classroom as you can possibly fit, and they'll all learn anyway. Lower class size is overrated. Well, if teachers and librarians and class size is all overrated, why have school at all? Now, I know what else you're thinking. You're thinking, but Ben, there's a practical concern. What are we going to do with all these kids if they're not in school? Well, let's face it, folks. By and large, that's what most people who don't send their kids to the public schools, that's how they view the public schools anyway. It's like a giant daycare center to keep the kids off the street, for part of the day, the business day, and then let them loose. So listen, this is where everybody contributes, okay? Everybody pitches in. So it'll be like a giant take your kid to work day, even if it's not your kid. I know the Chicago Tribune editorial board will take like 100 kids to help them out. We could use a kid or two to help link the guests in.
Oh, my God. That'd be awesome.
What the heck? Shared sacrifices. School is overrated, folks. Look, take the kid, bring him in, have him sit in the corner, give him a cell phone, tell him just to look stuff up on Google. He'll learn how to read in no time. Besides, reading's overrated. Writing's overrated. You learn all that stuff, you might get smart and ask some critical questions that the mayor won't know how to answer. Folks, I'm telling you, school is overrated. We got a great show today, everybody. Miles Kampf-Lassin will be in the studio from In These Times. I'll tell you what, he learned a few things in school. He knows all about politics, local, national, and state. We'll be talking about that. And then the young man from the Northwest Side, the proud graduate of, I believe, Foreman High School, young Kenny Davis. No, I think it was Prosser High School. Yeah, 2 public school graduates coming into the studio one day, They learned something from their teachers. And I believe Miles went to Whitney Young High School. Anyway, Kenny Davis will be here. We'll be breaking down the budget. Ken Davis has been following budgets in the city of Chicago, folks, going back to the 80s. Also, a lot of Trump talk while we're dealing with the reality of a teacher strike here in the city of Chicago, while we're trying to figure out how to pay our obligations, where we're going to find the money in an overtaxed city. Trump has lost his mind in Washington, and there's just evidence of that on a daily basis. Yesterday's insurrection by congressional Republicans. Man, do I miss Monroe. Hurry up back, Monroe. Come on back from L.A.
Putin.
He's got his shades on, man. I'm on L.A., man. He's just digging L.A. But he tells me back next week. I can't wait to take the deep dive on this. Congressional Republicans have lost their freaking minds. They had their mini insurrection yesterday, invading a hearing room in the back offices of Congress in Washington. Republicans are standing up for their president, Donald Trump. So I may get some comments about that from Kenneth Davis and Miles. And by the way, Tim Ryan dropped out of the race. I don't know if you saw this. I don't even remember who Tim Ryan is. No, not Meg Ryan, okay? Meg Ryan's an actress. Tim Ryan is a congressman from Ohio.
Meg's husband.
No, not even related. But anyway, he just stepped down. I saw that as I was coming in. Tim Ryan was standing. He said he was going to represent the centrists and those to the little right of Bernie Sanders. Well, maybe a lot to the right of Bernie Sanders. He dropped out of the race. So now, there's only 18 candidates. How about that? We're down to 18
All
candidates.
right, we're getting there.
We're getting there, yeah. It's raising
How many, only one can go through, right?
That is
okay,
correct.
We got a ways to go.
Man, I'll tell you what. I know who went to school. Young Dennis over there learned a thing or two in the Alton public school system. Anyway, so we'll talk about some national politics as well. So a lot of political talk ahead of us. But first, the man from Alton, the man they call the doctor, with the news.
How's it going, everybody? My name's Dennis. Hey, for all the people who... What's so funny?
I just always love it when you go, my name's Dennis. I am not a doctor.
For everyone who watches our program via live stream or listens live, we love all of you.
Where's the camera?
It's right there. We're using the TV camera today. I don't even know if they can see us. We are good at the audio part. The video part, we're so-so. So anybody who watches or listens to this program live, boy, you're so patient. We appreciate you. And if you ever miss any of this program, remember, you can download previous Ben Joravsky shows and Benny J bonus interviews at both Chicago Sun-Times and Chicago Reader websites, or wherever else you download your favorite podcast. While we appreciate that you guys listen and watch live, we love doing it live. We wouldn't do it any other way. In fact, when we first met up with the Sun-Times, we said we want to do it live. They said, you guys are stupid. Why do you want to do that? Why? Why do you want to do it live? It's like, because we're used to radio. That's how we do it. We do it live. If it were pre-recorded, it would seem like, I don't know, we'd have like so many takes.
No. We would not have so many takes. I guarantee. No, we're going, baby. You know, the bonus people come in for the bonus interviews. Bonus interviews every weekend. We drop them every weekend, right? But they come in. Can we? Like, if I make a mistake, can we just edit that?
Oh yeah, that happens. That happens. We're breaking the fourth wall today. That happens when WBEZ people come in because they're so they're perfectionists when it comes to their audio. God bless them. That's great. Yeah. And hey, you're gonna edit some of that out, right? Like, no, dude, we're keeping it all in there.
Edit, huh? Edit. We have an attitude toward edit a little the way the Chicago Tribune is as an attitude toward nurses. Who needs editors? So no, we let it fly. Man.
The lights just went out earlier. The live stream viewers, they saw the lights go out.
He just turned. Why'd he turn the lights off?
Right now, there's not even video of it. It's just a picture of you with your arm up in the air. I emailed Brian to come in and help us. You guys are awesome who listen and watch on the live stream, all right? And if you downloaded today's show, hey, how's it going? I'm Dennis. All right, so
it's just a fourth wall has been smashed to smithereens.
One of a kind, Ben. Our show is one of a kind.
One of a kind love affair.
Oh, okay. Who's that?
The Spinners. One of my favorite groups of all time. 70s, D, 70s.
All right.
Denise would know it. Denise, who came in here earlier today from the Sun-Times, she came in to chatted with us.
The 70s. What year is it right now?
2019.
Whoa. The 70s was a long time ago, huh? All right, let's begin with what's happening in Chicago and or Illinois this afternoon. As we mentioned earlier in the week, our Illinois governor has been laying low lately.
Yeah, you don't want to get involved in this school strike. No, negatory.
We do have a public event listed for J.B. Pritzker. This evening, he will be at the Revel Fulton Market to attend La Casa Norte's gala. Ooh la la, J.B. Pritzker.
Are you going to that thing?
What do you think?
Negatory.
I'll be eating pizza at home, getting crumbs all over my bed. All right.
Watching basketball.
Governor Pritzker also made the news this morning. He and his gubernatorial colleagues around the nation were the subject of a recent poll. A poll to find which governors are popular and which ones are, well, not so much. The following comes from the Chicago Sun-Times and Tina Spondella's Morning Consult. A nonpartisan, let's remember that part right there, a nonpartisan digital media and survey research company established in 2013 conducted 533,985 nationwide surveys with registered voters from July 1st through September 30th. The margin of error for Illinois was plus or minus 1%, and 21,533 registered Illinois voters were polled. The poll measured...
How many were polled?
21,533 registered Illinois voters.
Wow, they polled a lot of people.
Yeah, this morning consult, they're not playing around. The poll measured the most popular and unpopular governors by total approval and total disapproval. The most popular governor in the country, according to the poll, is Republican Massachusetts Governor Charlie Baker. Ben, have you heard of Charlie Baker? You know much about Charlie Baker?
I don't know much about him, but I've heard about him, and he's more or less a moderate Republican. So I guess he's popular because he's one of the few Republicans who is not totally afraid to criticize Donald John Trump from time to time. I guess that makes him immensely popular. Oh, what a bipartisan guy.
The rest of the popular governor list includes all Republican governors. Funny how that works, huh?
Yeah.
All right, now our governor, J.B. Pritzker, did not make the top 10 popular list, according to this nonpartisan poll. The most unpopular governor is Democratic Rhode Island Governor Gina Raimondo with a 36% approval rating and a 56% disapproval rating. Ben, you have history in Rhode Island.
Yeah, I do. I spent a lot of years in Rhode Island, way back, even before the 70s.
Oh,
Is that possible? And here's the interesting thing about the governor of Rhode Island. She's the one that generally centrists in the Democratic Party put up as an example of the kind of Democrat who would be effective. Because she, challenged the pension system in Rhode Island, forced some pension cuts on pensioners in Rhode Island. She was not afraid to alienate unions and sort of lose union support. So when people like Amy Klobuchar or columnists for the New York Times talk about a Democratic politician that they want to model themselves after, they think other Democrats should follow. They talk about the governor of Rhode Island, and now it turns out she's very unpopular. So nobody's popular. Oh, there's a great, let's emulate one of the most unpopular governor in the country. It's some crazy political times, D. I don't know who you can emulate these days and still remain in office.
So Gina Raimondo with a 36 approval rating and a 56% disapproval rating. And J.B. Pritzker made the top 10 unpopular list, ranking as the 8th most unpopular governor in the country. The top 10 unpopular list includes 6 Democrats and 4 Republicans. Ben Joravsky, should this poll concern us at all as we get closer to the 2020 election, or is this poll just a bunch of BS?
Well, there's a little of both sides. When you give me a choice, the reality is I didn't see much difference between the most popular and the least popular in terms of, I just gave it a brief look. So I think everybody's pretty unpopular, and I think this poll is a testament to our times. We're a very divided country. We're a very partisan country. Like, for instance, the Trump supporters are on a daily basis encouraged by their president, the president they love, to think of everybody who is even mildly critical of the president, to view them as the enemy. As the enemy of the state. And reporters are viewed as the enemy of the state. The press is viewed as the enemy of the state. So you got that going on the Republican side. And then you have people like me on the left of the equation. I'm so upset with the Republicans because they won't stand up to Donald Trump that I can't think of any Republican that I admire these days. So yeah, it's a very volatile time. It's a time of extremes. It's a time of bitter partisanship. We're seeing that here in the city of Chicago, even among Democrats. The school board, the teacher strike is an example of that. So I don't really know. I think that poll show is an accurate reflection of how volatile our times are and how bitterly divided we are. And I'll tell you what concerns me as we go forward in my worldview. I believe that J.B. Pritzker is absolutely correct to call for a fair tax, and that, of course, means raising the rates on the wealthiest people in the state of Illinois to pay off our obligations so we're not a regressive tax. The fact that he's so unpopular, the fact that his disapproval ratings are high, means that it's an uphill battle. We always knew it was going to be an uphill battle to get that referendum passed. So it's bad news, in my humble opinion, going forward for more progressive programs.
All right, so that was the latest poll there. That was fun, huh?
No, that was a lot of fun. Everybody hates everybody else. Woo! What a wonderful time we're living in. I can't think of anybody that's liked by everybody. Wow.
Hey, just remember.
Yeah. I'm J.B. Pritzker, and I'm not a perfect person.
Yes, remember that.
Never said he was perfect.
Never said he was perfect. I kind of like J.B., all right? So... Whatever.
What would you'd rank him as, like, the #1 governor, right?
Yeah, I definitely. He's good. I'm trying to think of governors I've lived under. I like Pat Quinn. There you go, D. Of course, I was complaining like crazy when he was the governor, but I liked him before he was the governor, and I liked him after he was the governor. And I love it when he comes on our show. I had my issues with him when he was actually the governor. But I like Pat Quinn. So there you go. Is that cool? I like Pat Quinn. Cool. I like J.B. Pritzker. Jim Edgar. You know, I like Jim Edgar. He was a Republican back in the day, D.
Back in the day.
Back in the day. Sam Shapiro, going way back in the day, all right? 1960s. Wow. I used to call him the Love Gov. That's a complicated story anyway.
You are old. Okay. That was fun, though. It's nice to talk about something else besides the ongoing problems of the city of Chicago for a little bit.
Can we just talk more about J.B. Pritzker's poll?
Fun's over. We need to talk about the latest developments on the Chicago teacher strike. Over 20,000 CTU members gathered around City Hall Wednesday during Mayor Lightfoot's Wednesday budget speech in protest. After the budget address, Lightfoot made her way to the Chicago Sun-Times building, and sadly, she did not make a trip past the bathrooms into our awesome studio.
She's like, I'm not going anywhere near that place. She made an appearance here, Dave, in defense of Lori Lightfoot. She made an appearance here, as you recall, when she was running for office. And as you recall, for 10 trivia points. Who was the guest for 10 trivia points and breakfast at the Waffle House, which I walked by today. I'm dying to go there. For 10 trivia points and breakfast at the Waffle House, who was a guest in the studio when Lori Lightfoot walked in?
Come on. So easy. Mark Sims.
Mark Sims. What's going on, Mark? Remember what he did? Oh, I'm scared. Out the door. Hey, wait. I don't want to ask any questions.
Oh, you know he listens to this program
I know.
every day.
Yes.
So making sure you know that.
I love Mark Sims dearly.
All right, after the budget address, Lightfoot made her way to the Chicago Sun-Times building. She was in the editorial boardroom, and according to the Sun-Times, even after the mass protest outside City Hall, the mayor showed no signs of caving, saying, quote, "What we've been very clear about is they've got to live within their means, whatever those means are, and they can't exceed that, and look to the city to bail them out." And I think that message has been delivered loud and clear to Dr. Jackson and her team. Janice Jackson, CPS. She's the CPS president, is that right?
No, Janice Jackson, CEO is what they call her.
Okay. Dr. and her team. And we also need the CTU to hear the same thing. This is not an unlimited pot of money to fund everything they want. Ben, what do you think of those comments from the mayor?
Well, I think what the mayor is doing there is what I said she was doing earlier, and she's trying in the public's mind to distinguish the city of Chicago and the budget that she just talked about yesterday from the budget that affects the Chicago public schools. And she's trying to act as though that she is some kind of neutral observer in all this, as opposed to the single most powerful and influential person in regards to the public schools. Again, folks, in the 1995, the state of Illinois passed a law that pretty much put the entire public school system of Chicago under the control of the mayor. The mayor appoints the school board. The mayor names who the CEO is. Janice Jackson owes her job to Lori Lightfoot. The mayor also has power in negotiating with the union over what the union can strike over. And right now, technically, since they're talking most vociferously about hiring nurses and hiring social workers and librarians, et cetera, and so forth, those are not strikeable issues. So ultimately, it would be the mayor who would go to court if it comes to this, and I hope it doesn't come to this, but I have a sense it will come to this. It would be the mayor who goes to court seeking an injunction from a judge to end the strike and if necessary, fine the union for being on strike, or possibly throwing union leaders into jail for being on strike. So to act as though the mayor is some kind of neutral observer is a shell game. In addition, we're going to hear a lot of talk about this. There's the old TIF program, which diverts money from public schools, from the Chicago public schools, into bank accounts controlled by the mayor. So it's not exactly an honest statement to say that they can't look to the city to bail them out, because the public schools of Chicago have effectively already ceded hundreds of millions of dollars in property taxes to the TIF program, which the mayor controls. So it's like the public schools could say, hey, mayor, we gave you that money. We don't think it's a great idea to spend it on Lincoln Yards and the 78. Kick it back to us. So it's not completely honest to pretend as though there's no connection between one and the other.
All right, so we heard from the mayor there. It's now time for what's become one of my favorite things to do since the teacher strike started, and that's play press conference audio from CTU Vice President and our friend Stacey Davis Gates. She held a press conference last night, gave everyone a bit of an update. We have the audio here. Shout out to the Chicago Teachers Union for the audio. Take it away, SDG.
Look, we are bargaining finally. After 10 months, we're passing proposals back and forth. It's moving. The teacher's contract is really not that sexy, y'all. Right? No, it's not. It involves a lot of things that the average person will never understand about a teacher's day. And so those are the things that we're doing at the table right now. Look, it took 10 months to get here. We're here. It's taken a lot of time. It is a huge inconvenience for the entire city of Chicago. It is deeply frustrating to everyone on this side of the bargaining table, and we're finally bargaining. Look, the fact of the matter is, if the mayor gets out the way, if her lawyers at the table that she sent just recently get out the way, then we can actually get a deal. We are working with educators. You know, the folks, when there's momentum at the table, the educators are in charge of the table from our side and on the CPS side. We may not agree on everything, and yet there's still movement, energy, and momentum. If her bargaining team, especially those who are educators on that team, are able to do the work, we can get a settlement done.
All right, that's SDG, Stacey Davis Gates. Yeah, we are big fans of Stacey Davis Gates, but I also want to point out, D, in fairness and accuracy, I voted twice for Lori Lightfoot.
That's
all
correct.
Right? Thank you, Robert Mueller. So I have never understood why Stacey Davis Gates and Lori Lightfoot could not have gotten together sometime soon after the April election and works a lot of these things out. Why it took, what is it? I forget how many, I've lost track, 10 months? I can't remember. I think Stacey said it. Why it took so long, and it took a strike. It's the absolute worst place to try to settle these vexing problems that Chicago faces. That was satire that began the show, where I suggested we just do away with the school year.
I couldn't tell.
Altogether. But the reality is this: if you don't adequately fund your public schools, what is the point of public education? If you're just going to allow classrooms to remain crowded, if you're not going to have nurses, you're not going to have librarians, you're not going to teach kids critical thinking skills. The Tribune's advice is just look it up on the computer. You don't need a librarian. You know, so if that's where you're heading, then why even have public schools in the first place? I know that Stacey Davis Gates and Lori Lightfoot have more in common than they don't have in common. And I just don't understand why they couldn't have gotten together and worked a lot of this stuff out in advance. Lori Lightfoot ran on many of the policies that the teachers are striking on. And Fran Spielman wrote a pretty revealing article in today's Sun-Times. I urge people to read it. It's the difference, she said, she noted, between being a candidate and being a mayor. Well, I would like for once, and I think a lot of people in this country, we talked earlier about how unpopular so many politicians are. How about a politician who does what he or she says she's going to do? I think one of the reasons why Bernie Sanders, and Miles is here, he's got his Bernie Sanders button on, not really, but metaphorically he does. One of the reasons that Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump are popular with their followers is they more or less do what they say they're going to do. In Bernie Sanders' case, he's an unapologetic supporter of health care for all. In Donald Trump's situation, he's an unapologetic nut job. But either way, it seems to be what their supporters want. So, you know, I wish that Lori Lightfoot had worked on that in the same vein. And so when she became mayor, she had a couple of huge decisions she had to make. Number one was what she was going to do about that Lincoln Yards and 78 TIF deals. That's $2.3 billion that the city has dedicated to developing upscale projects in already gentrifying neighborhoods. She had a decision to make. Was she going to fight that? Was she going to resist that? Or was she just going to go along with it and just say, hey, there's nothing we can do about it, now let's move on? Was she going to try to find the money to lower class size and hire nurses, et cetera? That's something she'd have decided. Now, in the union's hand, everybody knows. I'm critical. I thought they overplayed their hand in the election. I thought they were way too critical of Lori Lightfoot. They demonized her. I thought, even politically, it just didn't make sense because I didn't see Lori Lightfoot losing to Tony Preckwinkle. So why would you pour so much good money, metaphorically speaking, here after bad? So I never understood that. And that probably, you know, Lori Lightfoot is a human being. So she probably carried a grudge against Stacey Davis Gates for all the things the Chicago Teachers Union said back during the campaign. And we are paying for it right now. So you have two powerful women who have a lot of power. I wish they could get together and figure out some kind of accord this. And I think, at least if you listen to the rhetoric of Lori Lightfoot, she is in agreement with Stacey Davis Gates. At least when she was a candidate, she was essentially running on the Chicago Teacher Union platform.
Right now joining us is Miles Kampf-Lassin. Said it right.
The pride and joy of Whitney Young High School. We have two public school graduates coming in today, D, so show some respect, all right?
Okay.
They learned from teachers. Chicago Public Schools teachers taught Miles how to read, and they taught young Kenneth Davis how to read. So there you go.
Miles, we're giving the updates on the Chicago teacher strike here, so feel free to weigh in with us. We're playing Stacey Davis Gates. I have one more clip of audio. I love this one.
No, I love when Stacey's
We're not anywhere on enforcement language. And that's actually the problem, because enforcement language is going to cost money. And the mayor's running around the city talking about you can't bail CPS out. A bailout for a smaller class size? Come on. That's not a bailout. That's an investment in the future of our country.
That's right.
You know, and so the paradigm has to shift. She has to get out of the way of success. She has to get out of the way of a monumental legacy building contract that she will actually benefit from, where she will be a hero. Like, the mayor has an opportunity to make this work for herself.
By the way, I love Stacey Davis Gates' press conference. All the reporters assemble. She's like, come on, bring it on. Bring it on. You call that a question? That's not a question. And then she just bats it away. Next question, bring it. Gotta love Stacey Davis. I agree with everything she says. Of course, she sounds like a column I wrote or have been writing for the last 20 years. Miles is nodding his head. But it's absolutely true. Lori Lightfoot would be a hero to all the progressives, and I would be leading the charge. I'd be out there going, I told you so, because all the progressives gave me so much grief because I was not waving the flag for Tony Preckwinkle. I'm still not waving the flag for Tony Preckwinkle, all right? But I would love to be able to say, Lori Lightfoot proved me right, okay? I voted for Lori Lightfoot, not once, but twice,
That's
Steve.
correct.
Thank you, Robert Mueller. And so I agree with Stacey Davis Gates. She could be a hero. Lower the class size, at least get some language in the contract that would ramp us up. That's what they're talking about, folks. It's not literally talking about bringing in 500 nurses, although I could argue that we could use a whole bunch of nurses, but they're already talking about ramping up. So a lot of this is a power struggle, D. You know that. You know, like when Dennis and I are on the train going home, figuring things out, we have a power struggle. Oh, we're going to do it this way. No, we're going to do it this way. We always end up doing it his way. But so I'm like Lori Lightfoot and you're Stacey Davis Gates. And that
Ben, enough of the bonus interviews, all right? We've done 3. That's a lot, all right? I want to go home. That's a typical Ben Joravsky
Come
show
on, man.
argument.
One more. I just met somebody in the hallway. He's a Bulls fan. Let's bring him in.
So that was Wednesday. On to today. And yes, the teachers are still on strike. We're now on day 6. But if you want to be dramatic about it, day 8.
The Tribune counts weekends, okay, D? All right? And I believe everything I read in the Tribune. We don't need nurses. We don't need a lower class size. And librarians. You don't need them in the age of Google. All right, D? Get it right.
CTU President Jesse Sharkey gave a press conference this morning. Here's the latest. And while it's nowhere as near catchy, take it away, JS.
In the last couple of days, it's become apparent that the Chicago Teachers Union strike of 2019 is entering a new phase. It's a phase in which, in order to achieve a fair settlement, the mayor of the city of Chicago is going to have to bring more resources to the table. We've been asked by our members and by the people of the city of Chicago to address critical shortcomings and problems in our public schools. We're trying to achieve a negotiation on class size, on staffing, and on pay and benefits that allows us to hold our heads high and say that our public schools are delivering what they need to deliver for the children of Chicago. We're trying to put together a puzzle in order to end this strike, but we don't have enough pieces on the table in order to complete the puzzle. The mayor still has a handful of pieces in her pocket. Until she takes the pieces of the puzzle out of her pocket and puts them on the table, we're not going to solve the puzzle. We're not going to complete the picture. And those pieces amount to resources. So, for example, for class size, the mayor said she wants to address class size. That's great. But it's not adequate what she's doing so far. $700,000 for all the high schools in the city of Chicago. It's not going to get the job done. There's almost 100 high schools. A class size provisions that don't include enforcement. We can get this deal done if there's a commitment of some resources from the mayor.
All right. Do you hear the horns in the background?
Yeah. Hey, quit the support right now. I'm trying to talk. He was getting tested there.
He was got a little time. I was going to bring Miles and get his thoughts. Let me just say this. I like Jesse a lot. I wrote an article about him way back when, D, when you were still in Alton. He was a high school teacher at Sen. So I've known him for a long time, and I agree with a lot of what he had to say there. But just on a personal level, man, give Stacy the microphone. I love it when SDG gets in front of those reporters. Next question. You call that a question? Oh, man. So, anyway.
I just love how the reporters react to it. Oh, my, that was honest. Wow, Stacy.
The reporters dealing with Stacy. Like, wow, I don't know what quite to say. Miles, what's your thoughts about what Jesse had to say?
Well, I think Jesse's been a very strong voice for the teachers union, but you got to give some love to Stacey Davis Gates when she's out there. You know, the other day you could sense the spirit of Karen running through her veins. You know, when they asked her, you know, what do you say to the reports that you wanted the strike all along? And she just said, "That's petty." Next question.
Yeah.
You know?
Next question. I love that. Yeah. Next.
That's
question.
petty. Next.
Yeah, it's incredible. I mean, I think that speaks to the frustration that so many people in the city feel right now about. Not just the fact there's like a stalemate, a log jam, you know, these are problems on both sides. It gets back to exactly what you were talking about in Fran's column. It's about, you know, people are having buyer's remorse right now about, and that's what I see. You know, I've so many people I know that supported Lori Lightfoot, obviously. I mean, she won with a pretty commanding majority. So, you know, people, including progressives, people that have long time been advocates for social justice in this city, including a lot of people that worked alongside the late great Harold Washington, you know, and these are the people now that are in a position of having to understand or explain or even defend the actions of this mayor who continues to not meet the demands of teachers, of the frontline workers in our communities. So I think that's kind of where things stand right now. And I can't see any other way out of this than for her to comply with some of these demands and meet them at the table, because they're not, you saw yesterday, there was 25, 30,000 people out on the street. That's, you know, not good for her, nor does it represent a vote of confidence in the way that she wants to lead this city.
I say when Jesse says there's pieces of the puzzle that are missing, just throw the pieces in and deal with just kick the can down the road. That's my advice. And what we always do in the city of Chicago, we kick the can down the road.
Well, I think that gets to the point. This is why these negotiations are so difficult right now, is that the city has demanded that this be a 5-year contract. And it makes sense politically, because clearly the mayor does not want to have to deal with another contract before her term is up. You know, she doesn't want to have to deal with this again. But, you know, the union wanted a 3-year contract. If there's a 5-year contract, that means that whatever's decided right now, they will not get to relitigate these issues for another 5 years. So this is an incredibly important investment, and it's the only way to have an enforceable strategy to make the mayor comply with the things that she ran on. When you know, she campaigned on lower class size, she campaigned on fully funding the schools, she campaigned on a charter moratorium. Hell, she campaigned on a elected school board that then she got, you know,
she backed away from that.
She backed away from that. So, you know, if she's going to follow through on the things that she ran, and keep in mind, I mean, she was inaugurated in May. You know, these were promises that were made mere months ago. This is what the people of Chicago voted for and thought that they were going to get. So if she's going to follow through on those, this is the one chance if it's going to be a 5-year contract. So that's why they're pushing so hard and making clear that this needs to be not just, as you said, is what has happened so many times before, kicking the can down the road. We'll figure it out once we, you know, get new injections of cash. No, this is the time. You know, this is the way we got to move forward.
Well, you know, when you say that this is what people voted for, and I've been thinking a lot about this, Miles. Is this what people voted for? And, you know, I struggle with this. First of all, only, 34% of the people voted. So, and what was it, 75% voted for Lori Lightfoot. She got an overwhelming majority of people that supported her. And I just, at this stage, I'm not quite sure what people in Chicago want. And part of this is, you know, I look at the voting records of Chicagoans, and they're just so muted. It's so hard to decipher what Chicagoans want from their tax dollars, and what do they want? What objective do they want? What do they want government to do? What exactly do they think? I've talked to so many different people. Do they think we could adequately fund our schools? Like, I have so many people tell me, Ben, that's unrealistic to have nurses in the public schools. Or it's unrealistic to have librarians in the public schools. This is not, people tell me this. I read this on a regular basis in the newspapers. So I'm like, well, what do you want from your tax dollars? And, and mayors give speeches, Miles, where they say, we want to eradicate the inequities between the poorest and the wealthiest. And yet then they turn around and say, well, we can't afford it. So they say they want to eradicate the inequities, and then they say they can't afford it. And then so many people in the public, they come on this show. I have many people come on this show go, Ben, you can't afford all this stuff. So I don't know what people in the city of Chicago realistically are voting for.
Well, I don't think that what they're voting for is, corporate giveaways. And I don't think what they're voting for is to, oversee the same status quo. The direction of the city needs to fundamentally change, and I do think that that's what this election was about. That's why Paul Vallis isn't our mayor. That's why Gary McCarthy isn't our mayor right now.
Or Bill Daley.
Or Bill Daley. I mean, people made a choice that they were, there were really two lanes in this past mayoral election. Granted, in the first round, I mean, Lori just came out slightly on top. That's what got her into the runoff with Tony Preckwinkle, and both of them were kind of occupying the same lane. That said, I think in many ways the election became kind of a referendum on corruption and on Ed Burke, and that really did paint Tony Preckwinkle in a terrible light. And also, Lori was kind of a newcomer to politics, and she didn't have the same kind of record that a lot of these other people had. And she embraced, as you just said, much of the CTU's platform on education. So there's no other way to look at this, I think, than saying people in the city of Chicago chose a new direction for the city. They didn't want Rahm Emanuel 2.0. And, Lori, I think, has done some good things so far in office, with the changing the licensing fees and car ticketing. And she's made some moves towards reducing some of the most regressive fines and fees. But then look at this budget she rolls out with. There's no, new progressive taxation. She once again says we can't do a corporate head tax. It's going to make businesses flee, as if, the problem in this city is rich people leaving rather than the
people get
poor black
out,
people that are already seeing an exodus. So I think that's where we need to see some follow through on campaign pledges, because otherwise that's just what breeds the cynicism that pervades our politics right now, is when people claim a mantle while they're running for office and then immediately pull back once they actually are in the reins of power and they have all the pressures in office, when there's campaign contributors, when there's, business lobbyists, all kinds of people in their ear. That's the test, is whether people can stand up to that pressure and still follow through. And that's what this mayor's facing right now.
I actually agree with that last point so strongly. When I think of the cynicism and apathy, so much of it stems from this almost nihilistic attitude that people have, that no matter who you vote for, it won't matter. And they see it come out in practice time after time after time. Now, on the state level, with Pritzker, there were some things, positive things that were passed, and yet he's still unpopular. So we're just it's like a real desperate time right now, Miles. I mean, I think Pritzker coming through on his promise to legalize marijuana, and we were just when Dennis and I were driving home, one of our favorite things to do is we listen to the Joe Rogan. I'm almost embarrassed to say we love listening to Joe Rogan, but Joe Rogan is always, one of his main things is like legalizing marijuana. Joe Rogan was on ahead of that one way before anybody in the like a mainstream politician was. And yet we're so jaded. I don't see any there's no love for J.B. Pritzker for passing marijuana. Do you follow? It's just like, well, that's done. That's gobbled up. And
I think people respond, though, to changes in their lives, not necessarily to bills getting signed. And that's, those effects have to actually happen before people will view somebody as being successful or being popular. And we passed that bill, but it's not gone into effect. It's going to go in January 1st. It might now get delayed to July because of these new deals in the city, at least in the city proper, because of these other deals that have happened. So I think until people start to actually feel the impacts of these things, of wage increases, of the changes to policies around reproductive health, all of the things that this governor has helped make happen in his first term, a lot of that is still coming down the pike. So I think that's when there will be an actual referendum on the governor. I think it's pretty early to test people's opinions.
All right, do you get any more updates?
That's it. Now you're in the know of what's going on in Chicago and or Illinois. As today's show rolls along, I will be hitting F5 refresh on Chicago Sun-Times for any more updates on the Chicago teacher strike. And coming up later, we're going to be talking all about Mayor Lightfoot's budget address with former host of the Chicago Newsroom. You know him, you love him, Kenny D. Ken Davis. And you have to stick around, listeners, because I have a nice little treat for all of you as well. Nice little treat for Ben. Fox 32 had on a gentleman from, well, no one's favorite Illinois political organization, the Illinois Policy Institute. And
Router's old crowd.
And this guy shared his thoughts on Mayor Lightfoot's budget address.
The Illinois Policy Institute, number cruncher that you are. Thank you for coming on again.
Thanks for having me on.
So you watched the address, you know the talking points. Is this blowing smoke, or is this something that is a really good budget she's proposing?
I'd say it's somewhere in between those two things. So there are some one-time revenue sources in here. The debt refinancing, while it might be a good thing, it's something you can only rely on 1 year because she's kind of front-loading all the savings from that.
All right, that's all you get for now, everybody. Okay. That's all you get for now. Ben, hold it tight. Right, Adam Schuster's his name.
Oh, I've seen that name. Yeah, okay. And who was the reporter?
I couldn't tell you.
Oh, okay, all right.
Jim Jones.
Jim Jones. All right, well, I'm looking forward to that. We'll play that one when young Kenneth is in the studio.
More to come on that, so don't go anywhere, everybody. It's the Ben Joravsky Show, live from the Chicago Sun-Times.
All right.
Today's Ben Joravsky Show was brought to you in part by Chicago Architecture Center. Get to know your city on one of Chicago Architecture Center's 65 walking tours. Hear the unforgettable secrets and stories behind Chicago architecture from our expert docents. Book your tour at architecture.org/tours. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm actually on a tour right now.
Oh, wow, look at that building. Get a special discount for Illinois residents from July 15th to August 15th. All Illinois residents get 50% off select walking tours. Visit architecture.org/IL-resident.
Did you know that 40% of the people in Illinois opt to be cremated? Well, it's true. And Chicagoland Cremation Options honors their wishes by providing cremation services directly to the general public. Chicagoland Cremation Options provides an affordable, ethical, and easy cremation arrangement, whether in person or online. Save thousands and streamline the process by going directly to Chicagoland Cremation Options. It's a family-owned business operated by my good friend, Douglas Klein. Here's how you reach them. ChicagolandCremationOptions.com. One more time, ChicagolandCremationOptions.com.
Hey, podcast fans. I'm assuming that's you because you're listening to this podcast, right? The Chicago Sun-Times political web series, The Fran Spielman Show, is now available, that's right, as a podcast. The Fran Spielman Show features weekly interviews with the lawmakers, journalists, and others who are shaping our city. Fran, I don't know if you know this or not, guys, she holds nothing back. She goes deep into City Hall to bring you the real scoop on Chicago politics. And now, that's now, NOW, you can listen to her show on all of your favorite podcast apps. Head to City Hall with Fran and get even more great political coverage from the Chicago Sun-Times. Listen and subscribe now at suntimes.com/Fran-show. That's suntimes.com/FRAN-SHOW. Welcome back to the Ben Joravsky Show, live from the Chicago Sun-Times.
Miles Kampf-Lassin in the studio, the pride and joy of Whitney Young High School, the pride and joy of Beverly, and the pride and joy of In These Times of Jacobin magazine. A regular here on our show every Thursday, talking politics, national, state, and local. And I know you have a few more thoughts you want to weigh in on the teacher strike. I just want to say one thing. You mentioned Fran. I want to give a shout out to Mary Mitchell. Her column in today's Sun-Times was really good. And in the column, she was sort of struggling because on one hand, she has sympathy for Lori Lightfoot, the predicament Lori Lightfoot faces as mayor of the city of Chicago and all the pressure she is encountering from all the different sectors. I mean, I represent the left. Miles represents the left. But there's a very powerful sector on the right. And with a lot more money than I have or Miles has and a lot more influence. So she's under pressure from them. And then on the other hand, Mary Mitchell, I think, evokes really passionately compassionately the needs of Chicago school teachers in some of our poorest schools, and who are just dealing with reality that we can't even imagine in terms of overcrowded classrooms, lack of supplies. They have to dig into their pocketbooks to pay for essentials that most well-to-do suburban districts or private schools, they take for granted. And so we sort of forget sometimes, folks. We think about, oh, our parents have been inconvenienced by this strike. Or, oh, it's really a pain in the neck to have to hear that they can't come to terms on an agreement. Oh, it's just inconvenience. Can't they just cut a deal? There's a reality on the front lines that many teachers are facing, a real reality of dealing with the hardships of poverty. Maya talks about this a lot when she comes on Tuesday, and I thought Mary Mitchell did a very good job in today's Bright One of just evoking some of the issues that teachers are facing and why they're on strike. And again, they're not really on strike about money. Everybody talks about how teachers are selfish. Oh, they're just greedy. I mean, that was the right's favorite talking. The little talking point from the O's, and the centrist Democrats bought into it. This is a strike over basic needs that kids have in a classroom, like lower class size or more nurses. That's the heart of this strike. In the end, Stacey Davis Gates could get thrown into jail, if a judge rules that the strike's illegal. So these are very important issues, and I urge everybody to check out Mary Mitchell. Really good job by Mary Mitchell in today's Bright One. All right, what were you going to say?
Well, I read that column as well, and I generally agree, but I do think it's hard to imagine walking away from reading that column and not seeing the demands of the teachers union as critical to be met, and this contract is clearly the way to do that. You don't make these types of commitments in a budget or through talking points because those things could all be changed on a whim. The legally enforced. The reason they keep saying put it in writing is because that's the only way we can guarantee that these things are actually going to be funded and enforced. There were caps on class sizes in the last contract that are not being met. A quarter of CPS schools have oversized classrooms. That's not meeting the actual. There's no mechanism right now to enforce that. So that's why there's so much focus on this contract and not stopping the strike before we actually have a deal. I mean, that's it. To me, what really took me by surprise was that letter last week saying, come back to class before a deal is done. That
you mean that Lori Lightfoot, the letter yeah. Lori wrote to Jesse Sharkey.
That's right. That's right. Because to me, that betrays a lack of knowledge about how contract negotiations work, or it's a strong arm tactic to say, hey, stop this right now, come back to class, you're hurting our kids. Well, they know that. That's clear. It's clear that there's victims of this strike, but it's not just students, it's teachers as well who are not getting paid. And those costs are only going to increase next month. They could, at the end of the month, there's a possibility that teachers could have their health care payments cut off by the city if the strike continues on. We all hope it won't come to that, but that's another area where there's going to be sacrifice that teachers are putting, huge risk on the line. That's what happened to the GM strikers at the UAW. The GM took away their health care. Eventually they reneged on that, and right now there's supposedly a tentative agreement that is going to be voted on. But so that's a real thing. This happens in labor negotiations. Also, Mayor Lightfoot has said she's not going to add on extra days at the end of the class to make up for the days teachers have been on strike. That's never happened before in one of these negotiations. That's always part of the deal, is you add on classroom time at the end of the year, both to make up pay and also to make up education time for the students. What really surprised me is, hearing the rhetoric coming out of the mayor's office, which is about, we're not going to bail out CPS, as if CPS, our Chicago public school system, this public service we have that is supposed to provide equity for all residents of Chicago, is some type of a business or a bank or some kind of something that we would just throw money at. That's not. This is a public commitment. It's a public trust. I mean, that's the whole idea of having public education, is you value it and you fund it and you invest in it. You can't bail it out. That just is. That's language that sounds like it's coming from a corporate lawyer, not coming from somebody who really prioritizes the need of public education. I'm not saying that, I don't know what's in the mayor's heart of hearts, but when she uses language like that in her office that really stings for people that have put their lives into trying to educate the students of Chicago and make sure that, we provide actual equity in the classroom, which is what they're fighting for. They're not, as you just said, they're not fighting over money. And the other thing is this language of scarcity that has just dominated the debate coming out of the mayor's office. A mayoral aide said, and I'm pretty sure this was in the Sun-Times today, that we're scraping the bottom of the mayonnaise jar.
Yeah, I saw.
I mean, what?
Oh, don't get me started. That's a TIF. Yeah, they were talking about the TIF slush fund. Yeah, go ahead.
Scraping the bottom of the mayonnaise jar. Cities don't go broke because you're a taxing body. You can raise revenue. That is the entire. You're not a business that can just the revenue stops and therefore you're out of business or something.
Yeah.
It doesn't. We don't operate that way. Of course, there's more money, and it's just a matter of priorities. We always talk about the Lincoln Yards deal. Well, that's just one example of the type of corporate tax giveaways that we have, not just through the TIF program, but through our city's budget in general. So it's really a matter of priorities. And when you hear the mayor's office talking in the scarcity austerity language, it's it sounds like they're not moving closer, they're moving farther away from meeting the demands of the teachers.
All right, now to this point, there was an article in Jacobin. I know you did not write it. Micah wrote it, your partner in crime. So we're going to hold you accountable for it. And it was called Rahm Emanuel 2.0. I'll raise an objection right off the top and get your response. Lori Lightfoot is most definitely not Rahm Emanuel in one critical level. Putting aside rhetoric and policy. Now, you may say it doesn't matter, but on one critical level, her approach, her manner, her demeanor, the respect with which she generally treats people. Rahm was very arrogant. Rahm showed disdain, open disdain. Rahm was so obviously, just obviously like a con man working things for his best interest. Lori Lightfoot treats people with much greater respect. Just yesterday, for what it's worth, Pat Whalen, who was on the show, was walking out of the show, and Lori Lightfoot was leaving the Sun-Times, having just done an interview with the editorial board. And so when Pat Whalen, he recorded this, he filmed Lori Lightfoot. Hey, Mayor Lightfoot, why don't you come back to my show? And she was very nice. She came up and shook his hand, this, that, and the other thing. So on just one basic level, I object to people who compare Lori Lightfoot to Rahm Emanuel. I just think she's a more compassionate person who shows far more respect for the average person. So what's your response to that?
Well, also Rahm Emanuel has done, I don't know how to begin judging the damage that Rahm Emanuel has done to our country through his entire career, which was spent attacking working people at every angle, working to do things like pass through NAFTA, which, ship jobs overseas, passing this horrible crime bill that, fueled mass incarceration, doing things like working to pass welfare reform, which helped exacerbate extreme poverty in our country. These are what he's done on the national scale. Then when it comes to, his reign as the mayor of Chicago, he was the, neoliberal archetype of this new age of urban governance, where there's all, the approach seems to be, we're going to, try to milk everything we can out of the public sector so that we can increase corporate power and their influence over government, so that basically government is a way that we can make more money for more businesses. That is a very different approach than what Lori Lightfoot has brought forth so far. So I do agree that there's definitely a difference. What I also will say, though, is that there are some similarities in that this is the same way that Rahm Emanuel's term as mayor began, was with a teacher strike and with a fight that was rhetoric ramping up on both sides and a refusal to bargain. And ultimately we saw what happened there as Rahm Emanuel effectively folded and the teachers won what was largely seen as a victory. I don't think that Lori Lightfoot wants that as the takeaway from this current conflict. And there's a way out of that where she won't be reflecting the type of approach that Rahm Emanuel had, and that she could just settle this contract and give teachers a fair deal. And I agree with you and a lot of other people that she would be celebrated if she did that. So this is a good chance for her to prove not only that she's not wrong, but that she is the type of mayor that she campaigned to be.
Yeah, absolutely. If she figured out a way out of this teacher strike with that enabled her to say that she was adequately funding the classrooms and adding nurses, et cetera, and so forth, she would be here to the left. Now, whether there's always some few holdouts who just are going to want to fight Lori Lightfoot to the bitter end, so that, they may not be satisfied.
Well, you see it too, and I don't think am the first to see this, but if you go out to these rallies, the signs are starting to change, and they're getting a lot harder edge towards Lori Lightfoot. And when I talk to teachers, you mentioned Pride and Joy of Whitney Young. I saw a number of my former teachers out on the picket lines over the past few days, and these are people that voted. Some of them voted for Lori and that supported her, and now they're the same type of people saying, "This is what we got. This is what we voted for." No. We thought we were going to be getting a new direction. Let the light in. We got to have a new approach to city politics that treats public employees and teachers as bearers of the public trust. And when we're not doing that, when we're saying that they're greedy or they want to bail out, then that's going to piss a lot of people off, and it's going to get them thinking maybe this isn't the type of mayor we thought she was going to be.
Young Kenneth Davis is in the studio. We're going to bring him on in a little while. But before we do that, let's shift to national issues, Miles. And I know you're very disappointed that Congressman Tim Ryan has ended his presidential campaign. We're now down to only 18 Democrats running. And I believe that Ken Davis will announce he's running for president tomorrow. So it'll be up to 19 when Kenneth throws his hat in the ring. Just kidding, everybody. Tim Ryan, we've talked about him. I think you and I have actually talked about him. He was the one in the debate, one of the first debates, who said he was against a single-payer Medicare for All plan because he was going to be protecting the union negotiated health care plans that so many workers loved, and obviously that message didn't sail, no. And he is out of the race.
Well, I think, was an exemplar of this, what the Democratic Party has churned out for so long, which is these kind of tired centrists that want to be able to appeal to middle America, as if, he's congressman from Ohio. I understand that, that's a battleground state, and, Democrats want to win there. But I do not think that Tim Ryan ever represented the current energy in the Democratic Party and where the activism of the base is right now. And there's plenty of people just like Tim Ryan that are occupying that same space that he is. You could vote for Amy Klobuchar if you wanted. You could vote for Pete Buttigieg, who's now angling to become the candidate of kind of the neoliberal corporate elite as well. So I don't think that he ever was able to carve out space to make himself seem different enough. And, it's kind of, you remember last time, right? We had Lincoln Chafee and Martin O'Malley, these people that were also running. And
what a memory. You remember Lincoln Chafee?
Sadly, my brain is full of ridiculous things.
I remember, Lincoln Chafee from Rhode Island.
He was another one of these guys that was just running in the same kind of, tired centrist lane, and it just doesn't work. That's not what people want. You saw on Saturday, Bernie Sanders had 26,000 people out for his rally with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. That's where, energy is. Tim Ryan was not getting 26,000 people out. I don't know who he was getting out, but not enough to mount a credible campaign. And I think hopefully we're going to see that continue to happen with a lot of these other campaigns that can't register above 1% in the polls and can't raise enough money to stay through to the end.
And so do you think that AOC endorsement of Bernie Sanders is a game changer in any way? Or do you think it's just Bernie, getting his already enthusiastic supporters or even more enthusiastic?
Well, you could do a little thought experiment, right, and say what would have happened if that weekend Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Ilhan Omar and now Rashida Tlaib, it looks like on Sunday, is going to endorse Bernie. What if this whole group of the squad had endorsed Elizabeth Warren? I think you would have seen a complete, blackout of Bernie Sanders' campaign, and every national story would have been, about how Elizabeth Warren is building up all this progressive energy. When Bernie got the endorsement of these people, it was on like page 9 of the New York Times the next day. It's, people are treating it as if this means nothing when he had the biggest event of the entire campaign, even bigger than Trump's rallies, the 26,000 people out there. So I do think it injected some new energy into his campaign. I think you're going to see that reflected in the fundraising numbers. But also it's going to open the door to more endorsements. And you just saw today, actually, 3 aldermen here in the city came out and endorsed Bernie. Rossana Rodriguez of the 33rd Ward, Byron Sigcho of the 25th, and Carlos Rosa of the 35th. So I think you're going to start to see more of a cascade of young progressive people of color supporting Bernie and putting the lie to the, common media refrain that Bernie is the candidate of white bros everywhere. When, you have people like Ocasio-Cortez and Rossana Rodriguez saying, no, Bernie's my guy.
Well, as Alderwoman Jeanette Taylor said on the show, she's...
Watch your mouth.
Well, she said a lot of things I won't say. Man, the F-bomb was flying when she came on the show. Well, by the way, we have a separate download, so you could
just download that Benny J bonus interview right now at both Chicago Sun-Times and Chicago Reader websites and wherever else you download podcasts.
Thank you, Mr. Radio School. But she said she was for Bernie, and so I said, "Oh, you're a sister for Sanders." So that's a little different.
Sanders' sister.
A Sanders sister. That's correct. Yeah. Anyway, Brent, I'd love to ask you about Tulsi versus Hillary. I think we'll save that for next time around. That's an obsession that's growing in my brain. I don't know how many people care about it. I know Ken Davis probably has been taking the deep dive into that one. But I've got to let you go. But we need a chicken update.
Yeah.
All right. Give us that chicken update.
So
you brought chicken.
I didn't bring any chicken, but this is a hopeful story. So listeners may remember that I penned a piece a while back about the Popeyes chicken sandwich, this long, admired culinary artifact that now seems to be in the dustbin of history. But I want to tell everybody that news reports say that it is coming back. The
chicken sandwich?
The chicken sandwich will be back, and this is the update is that Popeyes says that they are going to be hiring a whole stream of new workers to handle the deluge of demand for the sandwich. So, hundreds and hundreds of new workers going to be stocking the stores. They said there's going to be, 2 employees at a lot of stores just to handle making the chicken sandwiches. Now, I don't want to say this has solved the problems that I point out in my article by any means. What we need to have is a living wage for fast food workers, and they need to have actual democratic control of their workplaces. That's what I believe, and I think that's the only way we can actually make this sandwich live up to its potential because of how delicious it is. But it is a good sign, I think, that the company is building up its workforce so that all of the massive demand will not be shouldered by poorly paid employees. So starting early November, they say the sandwich is going to be back and that they are going to have new employees for it. So that article is at jacobin.com, and it's Popeye's chicken sandwich under socialism. I encourage people to check it out. That is my vision.
You wrote the second article too, correct?
I wrote that article. That's the one I wrote. Yeah.
Man, I always listen. in this business, you get so little credit for doing anything. I just take credit for a lot of stuff, even whether I get it or not. We're going to do a little TIFF conversation with young Kenneth Davis. I'll be taking credit for absolutely everything. So give yourself credit. Hey, all you Popeyes workers out there, you owe Miles a free chicken sandwich.
Well, I think that they need to be getting paid. I mean, I say they should be getting paid $20 an hour. I also think that they should be able to unionize. They should be able to, be benefiting from this chicken sandwich and not just seeing corporate profits soar, which is what I think you're going to see in the next when the earnings are released next time. So I think there's a long way to go.
Can I ask a question about this? The supply chain, though, it's not just the workers inside the stores. It's where these chickens are coming from, where they're being processed, who's processing them. Is there any reporting on that?
Well, the industrial food chain in our country is a disgrace. I mean, the way that not only the economy of it works, in which there's private food producers that are making all the money off of it. They're not, locally sourcing any of the chicken or the breading for the sandwiches, but also, as you said, I mean, there's an ethical issue in terms of the treatment of the workers at these facilities that is supplying the chicken as well as the animals themselves. So I think there's a long way to go on all of those things, and I do address that those issues in the article.
All right, very good. Before we let you out the door, I just want to say all this talk of chicken reminds me that last night I was with my friends watching the Bulls season opener, and we dined on fried chicken from the Chicken Shack in Evanston. It was delicious. I was wolfing it down as my beloved Bulls lost a heartbreaker, 1 point. Oh, my God. Anyway,
Don't get me started.
Don't get me started, but I'm very proud of the fact we really
go ahead, get him started.
broadening our Dennis is allowing me to talk about basketball. So we've done a few podcasts about basketball. We just did one on our prediction show, which is, you can all check it out if you're a basketball fan. You did not participate in the prediction show because I'm always dragging you in the studio. I'm going to give Miles a vacation. So before you leave, I need to get your prediction. How many games will my beloved Bulls win this year?
Well, sadly, I do remember last week I made a kind of absurd prediction of 45 wins. Yeah. After seeing that display last night, I'm bringing it down to 35.
Oh, I asked you this question. 35? Man, he just jumps off the bandwagon.
Hey, 35 is still going to be they won 22 games last year. That's still going to be a massive increase. They got to get some defense. You saw the Charlotte Hornets hit a franchise record of threes on the Bulls. What are we doing here? Boylan.
Yeah, Miles jumped off the bandwagon. Ben, how are your beloved Bears doing?
The Bears. Didn't I predict they would win all their games, including the Super Bowl? Bears are so terrible, Miles. I refuse to even watch the Bears. That's how bad the Bears are.
Well, I just want to give a quick plug to another article that I wrote alongside the aforementioned Micah Utrecht in The Guardian a few days ago about the teachers' strike. It's called Chicago Teachers Strike Shows How to Go on Offense Against Austerity. So check that out at The Guardian, and you can follow me on Twitter at Miles K. Lassin, and check out In These Times. We've got tons of coverage on the teacher strike and all kinds of other stuff that I spend my day doing, so check it out.
All right, very good, Miles. Thank you so much. Young Kenneth Davis is in the studio. We'll bring him on after this break.
Oh, you're trying to...
Hey, everybody, what you're about to hear are the piano stylings of Jeff Manuel. Man, listen to Jeff go. Jeff Manuel has been playing piano around Chicago for years. He's played for conventions, for celebrities, played in basement bars with blues bands. He's played at prestigious social clubs, fine restaurants, and in the intimacy of private homes. Book Jeff Manuel at jeffemanuelpianist.com. Don't worry, I'll spell his name at the end of this commercial. You know what Chicago Magazine said? They said that Jeff Manuel is, quote, as comfortable with Chopin as he is with Cole Porter. He's excellent and his performance is joyous. He offers an elegant stream of compositions and interpretations that entertains the mind but won't hurt the ears. To hear more of Jeff Manuel's work and to book Jeff for your next event, go to jeffmanuelpianist.com. I'm going to spell it out for you, people. Jeff. M as in Mary, A, N as in Nancy, UELPIANIST.com. Take it away, Jeff Manuel.
It's Chicagoland's adult entertainment playground. It's the world-famous Admiral Theater, 3940 West Lawrence Avenue. The Admiral is homegrown from Chicago, and it's the most conveniently located club in all of the city. 15 minutes from the O'Hare Airport in downtown Chicago Loop. Voted Chicago's best strip club, the Admiral has showgirls galore and a variety of adult entertainment shows. The world-famous Admiral Theater, open every day from 7 p.m. to 6 a.m., 3940 West Lawrence Avenue. For events, showtime, and other information, visit AdmiralX.com. Must be 18 years of age or older to enter.
We're not anywhere on enforcement language, and that's actually the problem, because enforcement language is going to cost money, and the mayor's running around the city talking about you can't bail CPS out. A bailout for a smaller class size? Come on, that's not a bailout, that's an investment in the future of our country.
That's right.
You know, and so the paradigm has to shift. She has to get out of the way of success. She has to get out of the way of a monumental legacy building contract that she will actually benefit from, where she will be a hero. Like, the mayor has an opportunity to make this work for herself.
Okay, everybody, hour number 2 of your Ben Joravsky Show for Thursday, October 24th is just moments away. But before we get into that, we need to thank the following unions for sponsoring this program. First up, the International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers, Local 126 in District 8, the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local 9, the International Union of Operating Engineers, Local 150, and of course, today's program is brought to you by our good friends at the Chicago Federation of Labor. Hour number 2. Let's go. It is Thursday, October 24th, and live from the Chicago Sun-Times Chicago Reader Studio on Racine Avenue, this is the Ben Joravsky Show. In this hour of the program, one man, and one man only. Former host of the Chicago Newsroom, budget guru? We're going to find out. We're going to find out. Kenny D. Kent Davis. And now your host, Benny J. Ben Joravsky.
Yes, Ken Davis was the host of a great show called The Ken Davis Show. Well, I was the only person who called it The Ken Davis Show. Everybody else insisted on calling it the Chicago Newsroom or whatever they called it. Once again.
Nostalgia. A walk down nostalgia lane.
And can we just take, since we're walking down nostalgic lane, can we just just tell the story again how Ken...
No, not again. About the last show and how you got screwed on the last show.
I didn't get screwed, really. I mean, it was kind of Ken goes, Ben, I've thought about all the guests I've had in this show, and I really,
There's no one. There is no one I'd rather have. Benny J. There's no one I'd rather have on my final show
than
you. Will you please come?
I go, I'm so honored, young Kenneth. Yes, I'll be there. I'll just totally change my day. I'll start my show later just to be at your show. And then, Ben, I hate to say this to you, but Lori Lightfoot got back to me. Beat it, okay? Yes.
She was in her 3rd day as mayor at the time. So, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
Hey, Ben, this is my attorney, by the way, Will Johnson. I brought him along just in case there's any legal problems.
Oh, hey, Will.
Because and also I brought this along for you. I think you're going to need that.
Oh, that's awesome.
He brought the Grouch. This is
Ken Davis brought Groucho Marx glasses.
Yeah, a disguise. Yeah, since our camera isn't working. Yes, this is disguise glasses because I joked around that I'm in all kinds of trouble. Because of City Club Gate. This is one of my favorite topics of conversation. One of the many collateral damages, Ken.
Why are you so obsessed with this? I mean, it's just
the
Bulls I can understand, but this?
I can understand this more than the Bulls, all right? The Bulls is just a cry for help, all right? It's like me trying to go back into my childhood and
well, this is like Commonwealth Edison having a cry for help. They just needed some help.
All right, let's
getting
help.
a rate increase.
Let's help all our listeners out. And this probably has to do with my feelings about how I fit into this is like the giant, circle of Chicago. And the City Club for years and years. By the way, Danny Mahopoulos, let me just promote our bonus. We did an interview with young Dan from WBEZ, extraordinary investigative reporter who broke this story, and that'll be airing, I think, on Saturday. Anyway, do
you really still call him Meopolis when his name is Mealopoulos?
I call him usually young Daniel.
Oh, my God.
Danny or...
I'm just trying to suck up to Dan, that's all. I know how to pronounce your name.
Very good.
Oh, I figured out Duke Mossville about 2 weeks ago, so...
yeah, I got some issues. A lot of issues, okay? Been struggling with my whole life. So anyway, the City
It's
Club...
because of all the Jaworskis.
Yeah, Jaworskis. Right. It's a miracle I could pronounce my own name. Did I tell you I had dyslexia? Yeah, I had a tendency to reverse things. Anyway, young Daniel wrote this story about the City Club with Dave McKinney. Got to give him a shout out as well for WBEZ. And the City Club, let me just explain this, Ken. I don't know what your attitude toward the City Club is, but I just have always thought, I've never been a big fan of the City Club. It's just like everybody comes together and pretends that the system's legit. And the system is just like not legit, okay? It's an illegitimate system. Like there's some who are just feeding off of it, and including many people who are sitting in the City Club room. In that room where they get together and they listen to public officials and they all say what a great job they are doing. And I just never. Anyway, they invited me. I guess they were desperate. They just. I guess some other guests.
You're a part of the civic
fabric
conversation.
Well, they invited me, and I broke down and I went. And the only reason I went is because this guy, I had to go promote the show like anybody's going to listen in the City Club. Anyway, they gave me this wonderful little certificate. Okay,
yes, it's beautiful, and it's signed by Jay Doherty.
No. It was okay. No, let's get to. So anyway, so there I am sitting there. I can tell nobody wants to hear what I have to say at the City Club. Right, my typical radical lefty stuff, and they can't wait for me to leave. They give me the certificate. I beat it. Next week we got Lori Lightfoot coming in. All right. Oh, yeah, we're sold out for the Lori Lightfoot show, but we have plenty of rooms upstairs. We can watch it on TV. Not like this bum here. Nobody cares. Anyway, so I leave the City Club. All right, I did my City Club thing. And all right, Dennis, you happy? I did the City Club thing.
Yeah, I was happy. I didn't know they were.
Anyway, so I get the certificate. Lo and behold, I read. I can't even say my beloved bright one because I read it on
WBEZ. Your
on this
beloved
phone.
WBEZ. Yeah,
WBEZ. Damn. And Dave McKinney. They wrote this great story about how the head of the City Club apparently is a lobbyist. Jay Doherty is a lobbyist for Commonwealth Edison, and somehow or other, in this never-ending investigation into absolutely everything dealing with Southwest Side politics and Southwest suburban politics and Democratic corruption and Michael Joseph Madigan, somehow or other, Commonwealth Edison is involved. Young Daniel thinks that perhaps it's because they were hiring. The feds are looking to see whether they were hiring foot soldiers for Michael Madigan, just giving them do-nothing jobs as opposed to paying back Madigan. Who knows? But that's what they've... So they've investigated. They went to the City Club, and they raided the City Club. I was just like, Ken, the irony there, isn't that the place where you go to talk about corruption? Like how terrible it is. What's the corruption? We're going to discuss the corruption tax. Dick Simpson will be here, and David Orr, and all the other good government types. Let's discuss the... And then they were raiding... Yeah, Andy Shaw,
I don't regret making you go. Great content.
Yeah.
Well, that's that. Plus, I got this... Anyway, so...
Look at this. You got the name thing.
And where's that glass?
And right here in front of me, you put it in front of me. It's the City Club. You don't know how much I'd love to have one of these.
You never got invited to the City Club?
No, are you kidding? Why
bastards.
would I be invited?
Oh, God. Wait, time out. Did you ever go to a City Club gathering?
I go to them all the time. I just go as a media. I just go sign in on the press thing, and I can go and stand in the corner and watch it.
Oh, wait, time out. Did they give you free food when you go as a press?
They do, but I don't take it. I don't want their free food. Wow. It's like...
Look at the ideals balls on this guy.
I see all of the most luminary people in Chicago media at the trough feeding all that free food.
You know,
I decide not to do it.
You're not a sports fan, but one of the greatest scams, and I urge you to do this. I don't know if they still do. Back in the day, I did a couple sports stories, and I went to the Cubs and White Sox and Bulls. They feed the media.
Oh, yeah.
In the old
I'm
days,
sure
man,
they
these
do,
sports writers,
It's still old times.
Yeah,
there,
and then they'd be complaining.
Right.
They're not even paying for the food. Hey, the Muscacelli's not that good today, okay?
You're not old enough to remember this, but Janie...
Wow. God bless you for saying that.
Jane Byrne tried that a few times. She had a couple of things like where, the first Taste of Chicago, she had a big spread in the press room with all them standing there with all the chafing dishes, all food for the media. Nobody took a thing. And it was just because, you know, they were just trying to make a point to Jane Byrne. I think they were all like
dying to take
it, right? But nobody took anything, and I just thought that was really
well. I got to tell you, along those lines, 2,452 years ago, when I had a moment where I was a copy boy for the Chicago Daily News. I am not making this up. And may it rest in peace. And I'd be running around the old Chicago Sun-Times, Chicago Daily News newsroom. The legendary Irv Kupcinet, Kup, a columnist for the Sun-Times for years and years and years. He had his office there, and at Christmas time, man, the piles of presents outside his office. And I think he just let him sit there to show the world that he was not going to take the presents of people. Or maybe he just waited till Christmas was over and took them anyway. I don't know. But the legendary Kup, man, I see the piles of presents in there. So,
you know, whenever I come here, we get into this whole digression thing, and sometimes we get like 5, 6, 8 levels low. But the most serious case of that I ever saw was Dorothy. The courts, Dorothy Brown. Thank you very much. I was doing some video work once, and I had to do something with an interview in her office. I've never seen anything. Have you ever been in her actual office? It is unbelievable. It is like, well, now this was years ago. I don't know if it still is.
Remember.
Floor to ceiling of clocks, like glass clocks and crystal clocks that people have given her, all engraved, saying, thank you, you know, Clerk Brown, for all of your help and all that. Just like gifts around the whole room. It's just...
You know, I can't recall, you bringing up Dorothy Brown, if I was in her office, where it was, but we're going to be talking about TIFs in a little while, so it all comes together, Ken. But back in 2007, Dorothy Brown was running against Mayor Daley.
Yes.
And she was the only candidate, I think, or at least the best known candidate running against Mayor Daley. And I went in there ostensibly to interview her. And I ended up giving her, I'm not making this up, one of my famous tutorials on TIFs. I was already crusading against TIFs. It was 12 years ago, all right? And I was like in the year 5 of it. And so I remember sitting down and explaining to her how the TIF program worked.
So that's why you endorsed her.
Yes, I do. I would have voted. I would have voted for anybody. The headline of the article I wrote was just like, vote against him.
I voted for her too, and I did it because of your column.
Well,
yeah, it was
God,
like,
thank you.
Vote for anybody.
But Daley.
Yeah. So here, but let's all vote for Dorothy Brown.
Dorothy Brown. But Ken, I could tell it was in one ear and out the other, and she was like thinking, "Who is this lunatic?" You know.
No, she was thinking, "How can I get some of this TIF money?"
Yes, exactly. Which is what every mayor comes to the decision: get rid of the TIF program. It's been crazy. This is my money.
For mayor, it's going to all be mine. Right.
It's mine. I can spend it however I want. Even as I say reforming it, I know.
So, the City Club.
Oh, yes. Back to the City Club. So, Dan and Dave McKinney did this great story about how the feds are knocking on the door of the City Club. They raided the City Club, and now suddenly I'm worried. I spoke at the City Club.
Right, I know.
Will the feds be raiding me?
Right.
You know?
and now that you've got the certificate right there, I mean, it proves that you're part of this.
Well, the signature, I had Dan Mahopoulos when he was on the show sign it, okay? But then the pen ran out of ink, so he That's why I didn't completely finish autographing my City Club certificate. It's kind of a weird paper. It's hard to write on.
Yeah.
You could see that like all these pens ran out of ink as Dan was trying to sign it.
Oh, that's what that signature is.
Yeah, that's
Oh,
Dan's. I said, Dan, would you sign this certificate? It's so appropriate. But Ken, wise guy that he is, brought the Groucho Marx disguise so that if the feds do come a knocking and go, hey, Ben, what do you know about the City Club?
And Dennis is going to eat that certificate.
Yeah, I'll eat it. And Ken, that's what I was going to say. And that's why the door was locked when you tried coming in today. I'm just keeping it locked. Oh, God. Quit scaring me, Ken.
Anyway, I mean, come on. Let's just take a moment. What you must have laughed when you saw that the City Club. Is there no place in Chicago that won't be raided by the feds? The City Club, Ken.
Yeah, the City Club. Well, yeah, it's a. But I mean, Ben, you know, don't start getting all high and mighty on us. Look, little Commonwealth Edison. I mean, they're just a little company just trying to make it in a big man's world. You know, trying to make electricity and everything, and they needed to get that rate hike, right? I mean, their rates weren't high enough. So what did they do? Allegedly, no one knows this for sure, but there seems to be some evidence that they went around hiring politicians' friends. And then in return, the politicians voted for that.
By the way, here's the secret.
What's wrong with that?
Nothing wrong with it. Absolutely not. I love this city.
Free market. You don't understand the free market. You've never understood it.
I know. I know one thing about a free market. It ain't free to me. But you know, the funny thing is that they probably could have gotten the rate hikes. Even if they didn't hire the politicians, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
so,
they probably could have. Yeah.
But you know what the heck? Hey, your kid wants a job, no problem.
And according to Danny, what's the number? It was $530,000 over 8 years that Jay Doherty has been paid by Commonwealth Edison. I mean, legitimately as one of their lobbyists.
City. That's the city.
City Club.
No. I think that's just the money he was paid to lobby the city of Chicago.
Oh, is that right? Just to lobby the city of Chicago?
We don't know. Dan was explaining this way. I know this.
My point was just that it's a lot of money.
Yeah, it's a lot of money.
Yeah.
Dan was pointing this out. Again, I'm giving away the show, D. Before we drop the show on Saturday, we'll be dropping it.
That's fine. Is that
good radio school stuff?
Gives me a little
it's
tease.
promoing ahead.
It's tease? Okay, a tease. It's like a preview of a movie. Like I just watched the preview last night of the Dolomite, the new Eddie Murphy movie. So, okay, it's like that. So
it's exactly like that.
Can't wait for that movie to drop on Netflix. But anyway.
But we digress.
I digress. Tangent within a tangent. Yeah. So what Dan was saying is that apparently the state does not require lobbyists to detail how much money they get paid to lobby the state.
Oh, that's right.
And
yes,
it's just the city.
Yeah.
You know, Dan knows the rule book by heart.
Right.
So he knew that. And I'm like, God, who would have ever thought that the city had a higher standards than the state? What a great, our state of Illinois, ladies and gentlemen. But the City Club, man, and that's where Republicans come. That's like where Democrats and Republicans, they all come
together.
They come together because we believe in good government, you know, and just airing out and partisanship, bipartisanship.
Yes.
Well, here come the feds.
And good eating at Maggiano's.
And good evening, Maggiano's. All right, so you got Ken Davis in the studio. You're going to talk budget. And you have something you want to play for us, D?
Well, I have a quick update here first before we go any further. Chicago teachers strike update here. This is a 1237 from the Chicago Sun-Times. And no, it's not that big update. A deal has been cut. No. It says here the parents of 14 cross-country runners at Jones College Prep filed a complaint in Cook County Circuit Court against the Illinois High School Association and the Chicago Board of Education on Thursday on behalf of all Chicago public school athletes that have missed out on state playoffs as a result of the Chicago Teachers Union strike. The complaint filed by attorney Kevin Sterling claims that removing the athletes from the IHSA state competition is, quote, in violation of the rights conferred on CPS student athletes to participate in such competitions during the strike.
Yeah, well, that is...
that makes sense to me. I don't know.
Which part?
The athletes shouldn't have to...
Really? You know, when you say that, you think they should be allowed to participate?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I know that's probably anti-union, but
no. It's not the union. That's a provision of the Illinois High School Association.
Yeah.
I don't know why. Eric Zorn wrote about this, so let's give a shout out to young Eric. And he wrote about this in the Tribune. And what the heck? It's so funny, though, that I just have to point this out. Just the great concern that Chicago is showering on young athletes in the Chicago public schools. If anybody's ever been to a Chicago facility, realizes how backwards they are in relation to the suburbs. But when the teachers go on strike, suddenly everybody's concerned about the young athletes. But good for good for those Jones parents, huh? So that's the update on that. All right, let's go to budget and budget talk. Ken Davis, you've been following budgets in the city of Chicago for many, many years. You were a reporter back in the day at WBEZ, so you followed it that way. You had a talk show. You had people come in. And then you worked for the Daley administration. So you know a thing or two about how budgets are prepared, how the sausage is made.
Well, actually, I don't. But, I mean, there's only 2 or 3 people who actually know that part because they just go into a room and do it. But we have
a sense of it, how it goes.
Yeah.
So how do you think how do you think Lori played her card yesterday?
Well, you know, it's really hard not to really step into it up to your waist, isn't it? Very quickly in this stuff. I mean, I've been listening to you and you know, reading things. Everybody's kind of, with every hour that goes by, it gets a little bit more tense and things can be easily misconstrued. And the last thing you want to do is say something kind about Lori Lightfoot at a time like this, or, you know, it gets really tricky.
I already said 2 nice things about her today, so feel free to jump in.
Well, I would say this: the one thing that I do find myself feeling rather strongly about is the easy opportunity people are taking to pretend that Rahm Emanuel is still mayor, and that the people Rahm Emanuel put in place to run education in Chicago are still there. And that is the part that's not true. And I think you have to, I really believe that it's only fair play to say, come on, give Lori Lightfoot a little bit of opportunity. She's been in the office for whatever it is, 20 weeks or something. And she definitely ran on a platform that she could almost have been a CTU delegate if you heard what she was saying. And I believed her, and I think a lot of people did. I said on my final TV show, I admitted publicly that I voted for her, and it wasn't out of shame. I voted for her proudly. I thought she could bring in a new way of looking at things, and I have not changed my opinion despite what's going on now, because I do know, again, as somebody, one of the few advantages of being an old dude is that you've seen all this stuff come around many, many times. And there's no time when the rhetoric is more difficult than it is in the middle of a strike, when both sides have to throw stones at each other, whether they want to or not. And I admire the fact that Lori Lightfoot is different from Rahm Emanuel in that she is not igniting flames. She's not going around being incendiary and saying things like, well, you know, you guys already make too much money, or, you know, something like that. I think she's playing it about as well as I think I could if it were I, or you for that matter. I don't know that either of us could could take a more reasonable position than she's taking at this point. There are things that don't get talked about when we're in this really heightened emotional state. And one of them is just the fiscal situation that the city of Chicago is in. Now, I heard you and Troy 3 days ago, Troy LaRaviere, and I loved it. I thought it was such a great conversation. And I thought Troy LaRaviere put a lot of stuff on the table that I had not heard before, that was new. Some of the things about sorry, my mind just keeps going blank here, but the staffing ratios of schools, and how when you look at the smaller school systems throughout the state and you compare it to the city of Chicago, Chicago does not compare well. These are important things. These are important discussions that need to be had in public, and people need to keep these things in mind. However, I thought you guys kind of confused things a little bit when you started talking about everything being one big pot. I mean, I agree with you for the most part, but when you're in the middle of negotiations about a teacher contract, it's not one pot. There is a taxing body that raises money for the schools, and that is the primary source of funding for this contract. The city throws stuff in and can do as much as it wants to, especially with TIF gifts and all that kind of thing. But I don't think it's fair. I've heard rather extreme situations with conversations like, well, they gave Rahm Emanuel gave $1.3 billion to a developer in Lincoln Park. We can give that $1.3 billion to the schools. Well, it's not that easy. It's not. That is not the situation that Mayor Lightfoot is in. I don't come here as a defender of Mayor Lightfoot. I come here as a defender of intelligent debate, and I think that some of those things are off base. On the other hand, I'm also hearing people who are doing all these conversations about, teachers are now, the average teacher is being paid $75 an hour and all that, and that's too much. And so then you have to ask yourself, well, what does a police officer in Chicago get? I'll bet it's about that, maybe even a little more. So is a police officer worth more than a teacher? Is a firefighter worth more than a police officer? I don't know that these things are all that helpful. And what we're doing is we're filling the void while these guys are in a room debating.
Well, let me say this about...
Sorry for going on.
No, that was really well done. And I've been having conversations with Ken Davis for 40 years almost.
Yeah.
And you always play a role of somebody who's rational and somebody who's dispassionate and someone who's interested in arriving at more or less the truth. And
as close as you can come.
As close as you can possibly come to it in this political city where nothing is legitimate, as we just learned with the City Club. Right. And the truth is controlled by people who are concealing the truth.
Right, absolutely.
And I was taught by the great John McDermott when I started in covering politics in Chicago, writing about news in Chicago at the Reporter newsletter many years ago, that we should gather the facts, study a situation, gather facts, and come at the truth and leave opinions out of it. That's how I was trained, which is so bizarre where I am now.
Yeah.
And I quickly learned, Ken, that only a handful of people do that in the city of Chicago, and I'm talking to one right now. And in the reality of the city of Chicago, it's a very political game, and so truth is lost. So think about what you just said. In a real world, like we really wanted to talk about the problems facing us, we'd be like those engineers in, I forget which movie, Apollo 11. I remember see that movie where the spacecraft is having trouble, and down in Houston, they gather all the engineers in one room and they put on a table absolutely everything that the astronauts have to deal with to rectify that problem. Right. And they go, you're going to figure this out based on this. Right. And we would do the similar thing in the city of Chicago. We would say, all right, we have X amount of kids in our public schools. We have X amount of public schools. How many number of nurses should we have?
Right.
How many number of librarians should we have? What's the optimal amount? How much money do we have? How much would it cost if we hired librarians? Yeah. What would that impact would that have on our pension? That would be, we have smart people, Ken. We have mathematicians in this town. Yeah. You can get computers to figure this stuff out. That rational discussion, that John McDermott-esque discussion never happens in the city of Chicago. At least I've never seen it happen in all my years. You know, what we're told things. So we're told we can't afford nurses. We're told that. How do I know that?
Yeah.
I mean, I see we can afford Lincoln Yards. Your point's well taken. You can't literally take the $1.3 billion that we're dedicating over the next 23 years to Lincoln Yards. You can't literally take that and dedicate that right now. That's money that will pour into coffers over time. I understand that. But you could think of it as a commitment. You could say, well, we're borrowing money, $1.3 billion to over 23 years to pay for Lincoln Yards. We can borrow $1.3 billion to pay for nurses. So in that regard,
and of course, I think you could objectively say that $1.3 billion. I'm not a complete hater of Lincoln Yards. I think that I'd like to come back in 20 years and see it. I think it would be pretty amazing to see.
If we're still around at 20 years.
Well, yeah, I mean, but I am in favor of bold, audacious development plans. I think we need them. I think they're good for us. I'm not in favor of handing out, of giving the store to them in order to get it started, because as we all know, they do it without it. So, let's not be stupid in what we're thinking. But the A and B comparison is, what would we get for 23 years of $1.3 billion at Clybourne and Fullerton? What would we get for that? And what would we get if we put $1.3 billion today into the Chicago public schools? What would be the 20-year on benefit from that? We can't even imagine what might happen if the kids who are coming into first grade today, if they got an entire life in the Chicago public schools with it being funded like it's, I don't know,
Winnetka.
Evanston or something. Yeah, right? Wouldn't that be amazing? Wouldn't it be incredible if kids who don't have a home life to speak of, who don't get fed regularly, and there are thousands of them living a mile away from us, no matter where we live in Chicago, there are kids like this. What if we were able to take them and give them the resources that they actually need to become a motivated human being? And then stand back for 20 years and come back and look at it and see if it succeeded. I'll bet it did, and the city would be so much better for it. It's like, if we want to invest in our city, yes, we have to invest in the physical plant. We have to invest in beautiful things to make the city look and feel good. But the most important thing we can invest in is the kids. I know that sounds stupid to say. It's all about the children, as Mayor Daley used to say. It's all about the children, right? But it is all about the children.
Absolutely.
That is the fact.
And that was a great riff you went on there, Ken. And by the way, one more time, urge everybody to read Mary Mitchell today. She wrote a really moving column.
I agree.
And she talks about the conflicting pressures that Lori Lightfoot is facing. And I know it's easy to minimize those pressures because, like, I represent the left, and I'm demanding that she spend the money more equitably. Right. But there's powerful people, far wealthier than me, far more powerful, far more influential.
I don't know if they're more wealthy than you. But
yeah, well, that's true. I'm fat. Being a podcaster, Kenny, you don't know how much money we make, okay? It's a lot of money in podcasting.
You want to ride in our limo after the show?
Yeah, right. It's called the CTA. And it just comes right up over to Racine Avenue and picks us up. There's developers and money men who are far more influential than me who get a hold of the mayor, and they're pressing her with their concerns. So I know she's in the middle. At the same time, Mary Mitchell really does a good job of evoking what kids are facing. And yeah, you're absolutely correct. The city, you talk about like a debate free of any kind of bias. Just think about the Lincoln Yards debate.
Yeah.
At no point did
debate?
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
What debate? I don't remember one. I went to a couple of meetings, but I don't remember.
No debate. At no point did anybody in a position of power, the city of Chicago, the planning department, the board of education, the city council, the mayor's office, at no point did anybody ask the question you asked, which is, if we don't fund this project, what will happen to this land that's in the middle of the most gentrifying community already? What will happen?
Yeah.
They just said, oh, this land will not be developed, which is, of course, nobody believes that. So you talk about feeding just the sense that the whole system is illegitimate and there's no point. They say something, Ken, they argue something that's absolutely absurd.
Could I digress for just a second? It's a pretty major digression, but the Lincoln Yards thing, the thing that really has me ticked off about Lincoln Yards right now is that I saw Dave Roeder did a piece in the Sun-Times a couple of months ago, maybe a month and a half ago, about how, and I'm not criticizing him in this. I'm just saying that it was a piece about how Lincoln Yards has announced that they have cleaned up. They've cleaned up all of that horribly polluted area right there, right by the river. And that, this is a benefit that we've received from the city of Chicago as citizens of the city of Chicago. Lincoln Yards did this for us. Thank you very much, Lincoln Yards. And when I read it through the eyes of the guy who was the chief spokesperson many years ago for the Department of Environment when the city of Chicago had a Department of Environment. And we had an entire division of people whose only jobs was to go around and inspect what we called tank yanks. When you take a filthy tank full that was leaking some kind of gruesome material into the soil and the subsoil. And a removal of that tank requires a whole lot of very technical expertise that has to be very carefully monitored by federal and local agents, because you don't know how far down into the soil that stuff permeated. You don't know what it was. And this was a steel mill, okay? You can't think of anything that would have polluted the ground more than what that steel company did right there on that ground for years, for decades, almost 100 years. All right. So we get a press release saying, oh, and by the way, we've cleaned all that soil up. Thank you. You're welcome. Yeah. You're really welcome. Okay, well, maybe they did. And you know, I'm not here to cast aspersions against the good people at Sterling Bay. I don't know. Maybe they have real experts and they really did a really good job, and they spent millions of dollars and they spent months digging very deep down and doing all kinds of investigations and checking it out with the Illinois EPA and the US EPA while they were at it, making sure everything was done. And I know that usually takes about a year or so to get that all done. And I'm sure they did it. But I'd sure like to see a piece of paper somewhere saying that it was inspected and that it was really actually done properly, okay? This is the kind of stuff we're talking about. Exactly what you're saying about no one's ever in the real room when the real conversation happens, because that room is about the size of this, and it's got about the same 3 people we've got. Sit down, they have a little conversation, they walk out and say, okay, this is the way it's going to go, and they tell all their staffs, and all their staffs tell everybody else, and the next thing you know, it's a decision. It's been done. But the real decision wasn't made on the council floor. It wasn't made, in a great public hearing. No, it was just a couple people. They sat down, they made the deal.
Yes, absolutely. As the great Ricky Hendon says more than once, there's the meeting before the meeting, and then there's the meeting before the meeting before the meeting. Right. You learn a lot from Ricky Hendon, he's absolutely correct, and you're right. And so when you talk, again, going back to what we started with, where you talked about a city trying to figure out what's the best way to spend a limited amount of resources, what's the best bang for our buck. There's nothing resembling an honest discussion in the city of Chicago on these issues, Ken. I just wrote about this for the Reader. I had a laugh about this. We're right now being told we're broke. We're stretched to the limit. We've expended all our resources. We cannot afford the demands that the Chicago teachers are making for nurses and social workers and librarians. We're told this by the very same people who a year ago were telling us we could spend untold hundreds of millions of dollars subsidizing Amazon moving to our city.
Yeah.
Now, okay,
we'd find that money.
What happened? I'm like, dude, you can't have it two ways with any legitimacy. You can't say we have the money, untold amounts of money for Amazon, and then say we don't have the same amount of money to invest, as you say. Effectively, you're investing it directly in kids. Because you're using it to hire people who will help those kids. So I don't know how we can claim we're having a legitimate debate about these things, Ken.
Okay, now can I switch sides?
Go.
See, this is the problem that I get into, because almost all the good things that have ever happened in this country have happened because of organizing, have happened because of labor unions and the labor movement. And I completely and totally understand that.
Right.
But also a lot of some of the bad stuff that's happened in our certainly in the last century or so has been residuals from labor movements. And look at Chicago. Look at the budget for the city of Chicago and the pension mess that we're in. And I certainly, I'm one of them, by the way.
That's right.
I receive a small pension from the city of Chicago. I worked there for the 11 years. So
from
I was
the city
just
of Chicago.
Yeah,
I think you received that pension from me.
Well, yes, from you. Thank you, Ben.
I just want to say one more time, of all the money that I spend every year, your pension, top of give Kenny D a raise.
This is how I can afford to appear here for free.
And bring gifts.
And buy you gifts and stuff, right? That's
like
right.
This, my Groucho Marx. But your point is...
But what I'm saying is, when I hear these conversations going on, I'm thinking, there's a little piece of me that says, do I really want to put like hundreds more nurses and everything else on this payroll that we're going to be paying for forevermore, that we may not need them in this same way later on? We lose some flexibility when we put all this stuff into contracts. And it's a small point, but it's just, again, part of one of the things that makes me very nervous about this. We all know the kinds of abuses that have happened in the city of Chicago with Chicago workers, okay? I know this firsthand. I mean, I could tell you some fascinating stories about when the city started putting GPS transmitters on all the snow plows. And I actually did a video when I was working in the mayor's office in Streets and Sand in the control room, where you could see every single truck. When
was this?
This was in the aughts, about like 2000, 2005, maybe.
The good years of Mayor Richard M.
in the
Daley.
peak of the Mayor Daley years. And this was when Al Sanchez was the head of Streets and Sand. So
he knew how to clean up a snow-filled street, all right?
Yes, he did. He knew how to clean up things. So you have this huge screen, and there's every truck, and you can see not only the truck, but you can see the trace of where that truck's been in the last hour or two. So you can see that it was running along Irving Park, and then it stopped, and it did like maybe, I don't know, a Jewel parking lot or something.
Hey, man's got to buy groceries, Ken.
No, I'm just making that up. But that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I know that the kinds of abuses that happen when you have large organizations of people that are not directly supervised. You have to trust them to do things, right?
Yeah.
And I get twitchy when I think of just going into a thing and saying, yeah, sure, let's hire hundreds and hundreds more people. I'm not sure that makes me feel good.
Yeah.
Although, would I rather hire someone to look after these really needy kids in third grade? Yes.
Right.
So it's a weird
thing.
Weird problem.
I understand, and we're going to take a break because we'll take a break and then come back and do that TIF update that you've been promising. But I will say this: when it comes to contracts, I always love to say this. They're negotiating right now. I don't know where they are in the negotiations on how many nurses to hire, how many burns to hire, how many years they're going to hire, it takes to hire them, et cetera, and so forth. This is. Finally, they're discussing this. Should have discussed this away from the negotiating table from the get-go. I will point out, I love to point out, when people talk about contractual obligations, this is my favorite comeback to that. We are contractually obligated to pay up to $25 million for the developers, lawyers, and marketing fees for Lincoln Yards. $25 million on lawyers. You tell me that developer can't pay for his own freaking lawyers?
Okay, but that is not quite a fair comparison. What I'm talking about is how cities' payrolls just grow out of control over time. And big organizations like the Chicago Public Schools, again, Ben, we've both been around for a while. I remember when Joe Hannon made the announcement in 1979 that he was going to be cutting the bureaucracy well, it wasn't Pershing Road then, it was at 228 North LaSalle.
Wow,
okay?
What a memory.
So we've got a huge bureaucracy here. We're going to cut it in half, and we're going to say, right? And as you and I have joked over the years, if you could put that number together for the last 30 years, they would have fired over 2 million people.
Yeah.
But that's not the real way.
All right,
it works.
very good. We're just going to this is a debate that we'll have. We'll be in the senior citizen home. Happy days, happy farm. Ken, you're wrong.
I'll be right there to record all of it.
Hold on, guys. The camera's not working, so just talking to the mics. All right, we're going to take a break. We come back. The young doctor is going to play a tape or something from Fox TV. So
newfangled tape thing?
Yes, a tape in 2019. That's what I'll be playing. Not a doctor. We'll be right back.
That means more police doing work in your neighborhoods and your wards. Likewise, we will be merging the Department of Innovation and Technology with the Department of Fleet and Facility Management to create a new department that manages assets and information, strengthening the operations of both departments by combining their shared efficiencies, eliminating redundancies, all while reducing costs by approximately $1 million this coming year. And yet, While day-to-day operations of our technology infrastructure will be moved into one department, our Chief Information Officer and Chief Data Officer will then be placed in the Mayor's office to ensure technology policy is seamlessly incorporated with cutting-edge approaches in how government can work more efficiently and in greater partnership with Chicago's world-class tech community.
All right, everybody, it's football season, which means that the best sports reporters in Chicago want to offer you, yes, you, the person listening right now, an exclusive deal on unlimited digital access to all of the stories you love. Sun-Times has always been your go-to source for sports, and now the Chicago Sun-Times is a proud partner of the Chicago Bears. Ben, make that football noise.
Ready, set, 2020, hut, hut.
Yeah, ready, set, 2020. Hut, hut.
Blue Dog.
Oh, and we cannot forget Blue Dog. Hey, Ken, what's your football noise? A man yawning.
Falling asleep.
Big football fan.
He
Hey,
loves football.
I just learned what an audible was from your show yesterday or the day before.
Oh,
or something.
right.
I always heard that term. I never knew that's what an audible was.
You learn
Stick
something.
around.
You learn something new every day here on the Ben Joravsky Show.
Even old guys can learn.
Do not miss a game this season. Get all the big plays, scores, and stories from the Chicago Sun-Times for a limited time only. You can lock in our lowest rate yet. Only $29.99 for a full year of all the news and sports that you need to know. $29.99 for a full year of unlimited access. People, you can't do better than that. Take advantage of this exclusive deal now at suntimes.com/Ben. That's suntimes.com/BEN. Speaking of BEN, welcome back to the Ben Joravsky Show, live from the Chicago Sun-Times.
That was well done. Really well done. And as I like to point out, young Dennis is a proud graduate of radio school. Did you see how he did that?
Yes,
huh?
I did. Yes, I did.
Okay? The
Yes.
art is not lost.
And he can even do the radio voice.
He does
too.
the radio voice, does it all, man.
Ben, pop quiz. What's this on our heads right now we're wearing?
Cans of corn.
Oh, almost. Cans. Answer we were looking for was cans.
All right, and I just want to put this shout out.
Beer cans.
Anybody out there who wants to do a podcast, you send me a text, an email, send Dennis. He is the man to hire for your podcast. And I'm saying with this all sincerity, a one-man operation makes this show work when it does work. And it's this one dude right here from Alton, Illinois, the 618. So
and when it doesn't work, it's not his fault.
It's not
at all.
It's not. Yeah, it's not his fault.
Never.
It's somebody else's fault.
Yeah.
So if anybody's interested in having their own podcast, I urge you to reach out to us. This guy will help you. He's already doing like couple others, as I know.
Yeah. Well, we can't announce that one yet.
Okay, all right. We won't announce the one.
But no, proud producer of the Pat Whalen podcast,
Oh, are you
Yesterday's
now?
News.
Yeah. So anybody who wants to do a podcast, this is the guy to talk to.
All right, enough about me. Let's do some updates here on the program before we get out of here. We're talking budget with our good friend Ken Davis. You guys are going back and forth. You may disagree, agree on a few things, but I don't know. You guys may just agree on this one right here. We had a feller from, well, like I say all the time, no one's favorite Illinois political organization, the Illinois Policy Institute, Fox 32. About a week ago, I lost the controller of my television, Ken, and I couldn't change the channel, and it was stuck on Fox 32. I was like, crap, I guess I'll watch this or whatever. It was in the morning, and that's when I saw Stacey Davis Gates. She was riffing on there. I saw Maze Jackson on Fox 32. He's on there now.
We had fun with that one the other day.
Oh,
Maze
man.
Jackson.
It's been my guilty pleasure, I guess, since I lost my controller. I found my controller, and I still keep it on Fox 32 now. So I watched it this morning, and I noticed a gentleman by the name of Adam Schuster on from the Illinois Policy Institute, and I said, "Oh my God, Ben is gonna riff on this." So I made sure to grab
You're
the
not
audio.
saying Stacey Davis Gates is part of the Illinois Policy Institute, are you?
No, I'm not. No, I'm not. No, I am
They
not.
just had her on as somebody in the news. Okay, yeah.
That was a week
That was
ago.
in the news, yeah.
That was a week ago. This is today. Adam Schuster from the Illinois Policy Institute was on Fox 32 giving his thoughts on the budget. And as soon as he started talking tips, I said, okay, got to keep that for today and make sure Ben hears this. So
I've not heard this at all.
Oh, yeah, because this was at like 7:30 in the morning. What time did you wake up today?
No, I got up early. I got 9:45.
Woo!
Yeah, because I was up late last night watching
Proud of
the
you.
Bulls,
Till
eating
6:30.
fried chicken. Yeah.
That fried chicken will do it. All right, here's Adam Schuster. I have two clips here from the Illinois Policy Institute weighing in with his thoughts on the budget, and tips become, I think it may be in clip 2 where tips come up. But anyway, we'll hear it.
With the Illinois Policy Institute, number cruncher that you are. Thank you for coming on again.
Thanks for having me on.
So you watched the address, you know the talking points. Is this blowing smoke, or is this something that is a really good budget she's proposing?
I'd say it's somewhere in between those two things. So there are some one-time revenue sources in here. The debt refinancing, while it might be a good thing, it's something you can only rely on 1 year because she's kind of front-loading all the savings from that. Some of the other revenue sources she's asking for require help from Springfield, but I think she's doing the best she can with a really bad set of options. She started with this $838 million hole that's a giant deficit to have to close.
And more than she expected.
And much more than she expected, and it's really being driven by the rising cost of pensions. So while she's doing the best she can, she's being creative and trying to find new ways of making this work. She really should be the advocate for pension reform in Springfield. That's the help she should be asking for.
Pension reform, that means cutting pensions for geezers like Ken Davis. That's pension reform. So already they're not being honest with the words they use. You mean pension cuts. Just say pension cuts. That's what they mean. And by the way, the Illinois Policy Institute, just so anybody remembers, was Rauner's old research outfit. So they're very much anti-union. They're very much anti-pension. They think it's a waste of money to invest in geezers like Ken. And I'm going to speak up for Ken Davis. The guy gave
right after calling him a geezer.
Well, I'm a geezer too. They put their time in. There was the deal. You talk about contractual deals, all right? And we just talked about this. Ken says, well, you can't compare them. Well, it's a contract. A contract's a contract, young Kenneth. If we're bound to pay $25 million up to for the lawyers for Lincoln Yards,
go again.
Are we not bound by the same contractual agreement we have young Kenneth Davis? And I say the answer is yes, unless we're going to throw all contracts out the window. So, listen, pension reform means pension cuts. That's what he means. And one more time, it's not as though these are a nonpartisan group of bean counters. These are very much partisan people. If you bring me on, at least say, Ben's a lefty, okay? Mm-hmm. And he's coming at it from a leftist perspective. So if you're going to have somebody from the Illinois Policy Institute talk about it, how they're in the business, they're in the game to eradicate unions. Let's put it out there.
A couple of my very best friends lived in Wisconsin for 40 years. And one of them worked for the University of Wisconsin. And they had a perfectly well-funded and beautifully managed pension system. And so everybody's fine. Everybody's been paid well. And until Walker got in and started cutting the pensions, even though everything was vested and everything was 100% right where it was supposed to be, it can work. There's nothing difficult about maintaining a pension program.
You just have to maintain it. You have to maintain it.
Right.
You can't spend money that you're supposed to invest in your pension programs on other things.
And it's a relatively small investment each year if you maintain it properly. What happens is people go in there and start saying, well, we could maybe take a little pension vacation this year.
Yes. And by the way, I would make this, we talked earlier about how there's no objective debate where people take a look at and analyze, the pros and cons of anything. I would argue, I've not seen this, that paying you, Ken Davis, just using you as an example, since you're so kind to allow yourself to be used as an example, to work for the city of Chicago, provide labor that was needed, do things that people wanted on one level or another, at least educated me from time to time, and force you to live in the city of Chicago because there's residency requirements, is in of itself an investment in the city of Chicago. If we hire more nurses for the Chicago Public Schools, they will have to live in the city of Chicago. If they get a pension, they're going to have to contribute to the current pension system. We talk about needing to fortify our pension system. One way to help fortify it, at least at now, you hire more nurses, more librarians, they pay into the pension system. And by the way, because the laws have changed, they won't get the same full benefits as older pensioners will get.
Right.
So I could make an argument, love to see the argument made by somebody in the city of Chicago, that it's actually an investment in the city to spend public dollars on public employees.
And let's not forget that these old geezers are earning, in their pensions, they're earning enough to live on, and so they stay in the city of Chicago. Not all, a lot of people go to Florida, but there are a lot of people who stay in the city, and they become Like I would like to believe I am, just kind of like the kindly old guy who lives down at the end of the block, you know,
who invests in his property, takes care of his property, has renters that he takes care of. So this notion that we're just throwing our money away when we hire an employee like a nurse, but we're not throwing our money away when we invest in Amazon, I think is a phony choice there.
All right,
See, we totally agree.
Look at that.
What a nice moment.
Guys.
That was a beautiful moment.
That was great.
Yeah.
What can I say?
We both don't think much about giving money to Amazon.
Yeah. No, that was ridiculous.
We got one more piece of audio to play from this feller at the Illinois Policy Institute. But before we go to that, I want to read from our YouTube live stream chat room.
Wait, it's working?
Well, I mean, they can hear it. It's just the show logo.
I see. Okay.
They can't see it, but they can hear it.
Okay, cool.
Hi there, everyone.
Yeah.
Hi there.
You can't see the great Groucho Marx disguise that Kenny brought from me.
Believe me, nobody want to see me. I'm glad. I'm happy for this.
Ken.
I'm a radio guy.
Ken, come on. Yeah. You look great. You look great today, buddy.
Can I tell you? I'm not happy about the way I look.
By the way, so Brianna weighed in. Nice breakdown, Ken Davis. No one calculates the return on investment when you invest in kids.
Yeah,
that was a great riff. We got fans out there, buddy.
That was a great riff.
A sincere moment.
Jay Marie, though. Jay Marie's keeping us honest this afternoon. Jay Marie says, you all are giving Lori Lightfoot too much credit today. Let's see here. Giving her credit for not being Rom is a bit tiring. Enough already.
Okay, there you go.
Well, how about if I give her credit for the fact that she didn't go along with the elected school board for now, but she appointed a really good school board.
Well,
and they're doing,
I would argue. Okay, here we go.
No, here we go.
I would argue that it's not a good school board if they just stand behind her and support her whatever she does.
That's true.
That's like
true.
We're on the Lightfoot team school board as opposed to.
You know what, Ben? That's a very good point. I concede that.
All right, here's Adam Schuster from the Illinois Policy Institute. This is where they start. They play audio from Jesse Sharkey, and then he weighs in, and they start talking about TIFs.
She's also drawn the line, sort of a take it or leave it stance when it comes to the fact that she says the city has no more money. Jesse Sharkey, the CTU president, would disagree. I want to play something he said yesterday. Let's talk on the other side.
52% of the money that the taxing authority for TIFs comes out of the schools. That's been the dirty deal for downtown development, for the development in the West Loop, for the development on River North, for the Riverwalk, for Wolf Point, for the $40 million arena down there on Cermak, the Wintrust Arena. That's been the dirty little secret of development in the city. Some of those monies need to go back to our neighborhood schools so that we can deliver the educational quality that we need to deliver for students in poor neighborhoods.
So yesterday, Anita and I had our political editor, Mike Flannery, sitting where you're sitting, and he said that business is the engine that keeps Chicago running, and that's not really fair for Jesse to point out that there is money elsewhere with developments like the 78 and the Lincoln Yards. To that, you say what?
I would first say that Mayor Lightfoot has declared the largest TIF surplus in Chicago history. $300 million in TIF funds will be returned to the city of Chicago. $163 million of that will go to Chicago Public Schools to help offset the cost of the contract. So Mayor Lightfoot is listening to them, and she is using some of that money to help close holes in the city budget and to help meet the teachers union's demands. However, you're right that he's also being a little bit inaccurate in describing the TIF program the way it works. That money's earmarked for economic development. It wouldn't be there but for the economic development. And so to say that all of that money can be swept and somehow used to meet the teachers' demands is just inaccurate.
I knew you'd like that.
Oh, my God. Come on,
when are you
Adam.
joining the Illinois Policy Institute?
Come on, Illinois Policy Institute. You're supposed to be like, the watchdogs of the public purse. You sound like some press agent for Mayor Daley. Oh, Ben, the TIF program is wonderful. Remember Bert? You sound like Bert Nateras. Bert Nateras was the alderman of the 42nd Ward for anybody, who's too young to remember. And he was a big advocate of the TIF program, Ken. And I remember a debate where he was talking about if it wasn't for the TIF program and all its benefits, downtown Chicago would be like Phoenix. And I think he had this thing of tumbleweeds blowing through that. And I'm just like, I'm listening to old boy Adam Schuster there. I'm like, you sound just like Bert Nateras. Here's the reality, folks. Oh, my God, I could go on and on about this. And I'm really disappointed in supposed fiscal watchdogs like the Illinois Policy Institute for just voicing the propaganda of the TIF program. I'm going to remove my lefty hat and put on my I hate paying taxes hat. And the reality is this: every time.
That's your MAGA hat.
That's my MAGA hat. Yeah. Every time you create a TIF, you raise taxes on people. Ken and I discussed this on his old show. He used to bring me on the time. One more time, Ben. How does it work? Every time you create a TIF, you raise taxes on people because you limit amount of land that the taxing bodies can tax. The land in the TIF cannot be fully taxed for 23 years by the taxing bodies. So what do they have to do? They have to raise the rates on everybody. If Adam Schuster lives in the city of Chicago, I don't know where the kid lives, but if let's say he lives in the city of Chicago, Mike Flannery lives in the city of Chicago. I've explained this to Flannery, and he lives in Beverly. You live in the city of Chicago, your tax bill is higher because of the TIFs. That's a fact, folks. You're paying more. You don't even know where the money's going to. Why do I call it a slush fund? Because the amount of money we turn over to the city for TIFs every year exceeds the amount of projects they budgeted for it. That's why we call it a slush fund. That's why Lori Lightfoot could dig into it yesterday and announce, hey, guess what I'm doing? I'm returning $300 million to you, the taxpayers, to pay all these obligations. I'm a fiduciary wizard.
That Lightfoot impression's getting better and better, buddy.
Man, Schuster, you fall for that. That's slush. And as the head or some, I don't know what you are with the Illinois Policy Institute, you're something or other for them, you should be standing up against slush instead of, well, what a fiduciary wizard she is. She figured out a way to expend money.
When that artery finally pops and the ambulance comes to pick him up, at least we know that the city's going to get reimbursed for that ambulance.
Ken, we started off by talking about let's have a legitimate discussion. How can you have a legitimate discussion on TIFs when the fiscal watchdog from the right wing in the state of Illinois, the very people who are supposed to be looking out for the interests of taxpayers, are mouthing that stuff?
They're not right enough.
They're not right in terms of capital R, and they're not right in terms of lowercase r. You can't have a legitimate discussion about it. You can't say, well, it's a tax. It's a surcharge, and the amount you pay in property taxes that's dedicated to a slush fund controlled by the mayor.
Do you think there's any possibility that people kind of understand it and they think, well, but we really do like the Riverwalk?
Abso-freaking-lutely. And that was explained to me. Remember when we started off, you said, Ben, you can't think of it as one pot? Mm-hmm. It was a daily administration budget director who sat me down and explained how it works. And he goes, Ben, you're crusading against TIFs, and we think of it as a tool to pay our bills. And the mayor tells us every year, you got to come up with X, Y, Z to pay all these bills. I don't care how you do it, just do it. And I want to be able to tell the people you're doing it without raising taxes. Mm-hmm. So they came up with this TIF program. Mm-hmm. I've raised the white flag on it, Ken. I think we should expand it. Yeah. I mean, if the Adam Schusters of the world who represent taxpayers go, oh my God, what a miracle program. If Mike Flannery, who is like the watchdog reporter for Fox TV, oh, Ben, it's economic development. If these guys are singing, just let's turn the whole city into a giant TIF. We'll pay more money in taxes, but because it's a TIF, we won't think it's property taxes. Your tax bill will be going up, but you'll be like, well, it's not really going up, even though I'm paying more money. I'm a Chicagoan. I can think of two things at once, even if they're mutually exclusive. More money than Lori Lightfoot can hire the nurses.
So you're saying book Adam Schuster for a Benny J. bonus interview. I think that's what you're saying.
By the way, there wasn't an Adam Schuster. I wonder if it's the same guy. Years ago, he's a sports guy. Do you think it's the same guy?
I'll look it up.
Adam Schuster? I think his name was Adam Schuster. I'm Adam Schuster.
It's kind of fun. You get booked on the show, and you just get to sit here and watch Ben. You just see him. His face is just completely flushed. He's sweating. He's like,
oh man, that's my life every day now.
And then we get on the train ride home. This little guy, when we go past Trump Tower. Hey Ben, that's my.
And then 2 minutes later. Ben's asleep. Like, wake up, dude.
Oh, Adam Schuster. Good God. Oh, my God. Well, so much for the poor taxpayers of Chicago.
The other good news is there was no scoop and toss.
Oh, yeah. That's a whole other thing. Scoop and toss. That's that gimmick that, what was it, Daley or Rahm came up with?
Oh, no. Daley was doing that long before Rahm.
Where you take all your debt, you put it into one lump thing, and you throw it down. That's hence the scoop. But okay, explain to me something, Ken. Mm-hmm. Now, you're our budget expert. You're our show's Adam Schuster.
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
Economic development is good for the city. Right. Please explain to me how it is that what she did is not scoop and toss.
Geez, I thought I had this.
All right. I mean,
I'm letting Lori Lightfoot down here.
I'm reading it going, how, because there's always a challenge I find. So the challenge is, I want to take what Lori Lightfoot said or Mayor Rahm or any mayor said and put it in words that people can understand. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And so if I don't understand it, because it doesn't seem to make sense, I can't do that.
All right, here's the difference. The Rahm Emanuel way of doing things was to take all of the money, all of the debt, and throw it in a box, and then sell it to a bank, and then pay it off over 50 years, right? And so this year we're only responsible for like $5 million of that $50 billion that we just sold off. What Lori Lightfoot is saying is that she refinanced $200 million. Was it 200 million or billion? Geez, which was it? 200
million.
Million, yeah. She refinanced $200 million, and she put it into a 5-year program, which is going to be paid off over 5 years. And the savings from that is significant because it's a lower rate. It's a lower rate than the rate that this debt was at before. So there's some amount of money. Well, no, actually, it was a lot more than $200 million. The saving was $200 million, okay? So she got $200 million, and that will come over 5 years. It's whatever that is, $40 million a year or something. And what she did was she booked it all this year, which is hinky. But the point being that it used to be something that was over a lot longer terms, and the numbers were way out of kilter. And by doing the $200 million this year, I'm falling apart.
It's over. It's been a long show, and we should end it anyway. Yeah. And I think the reality is this.
But she was credited by Ralph Martira, who I respect over at the Tax Accountability Office, who has been very critical of all the scoop and toss, and he said that this was a better way of doing things, and he agreed with booking it all in the first year and not in the next 4 years because there are going to be other things that are going to be able to take it. Blah, blah, blah.
All right.
So there you are.
Well, it's the way I always say is like refinancing your home at a lower interest rate. It lowers the cost that you're paying for your house, and so then you could spend your money on other things like hiring a nurse. Let's say you just wanted to hire your own nurse.
Right.
So it all comes around.
Right.
All right. Enough has been said on this show. We're gonna end it for the day. I want to thank Ken Davis, of course, young Kenny D, as we call him, for coming in. Kenny D. And Miles. It was a while ago. Miles was in the studio talking about chicken and other things.
And other things.
And great show as always. We owe it all to the young man from Alton, Illinois, the pride and joy of the 618. Back home, as Ken knows, they call him White Lightning. Give yourself a raise. Take it out of petty cash.
Thank you, Ken.
See you tomorrow, everybody.
They call Ken White Lightning. And remember, you can download previous Ben Joravsky shows and Benny J bonus interviews at both Chicago Sun-Times and Chicago Reader websites, chicago.suntimes.com, chicagoreader.com, and wherever else you download podcast. Downloaders, you can listen to this program live or watch it sometimes. All you got to do is go to the Ben Joravsky Show Facebook page, at Benny J Show, BENNY, the letter J Show, the Chicago Sun-Times YouTube channel. It's a great time. It's fun stuff. Go check it out. We'll see you tomorrow.